Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 648. Passing on the Curse. Cerberus told him that chess had become extremely popular within the wizard circles, and it seemed that he was right. Even without formally introducing the game to Metropolis, the Magic Tower already had an established room for the wizards to play in. It even looked like they'd been playing for 2 years at least. Are you interested in the game? Michael turned around and followed the voice, seeing a middle-aged man with pepper hair and a rectangular mustache behind him. Judging purely from the fact that the mana surrounding this man was incredibly dense, it was easy to guess that this was the Tower Master. Lucius Waterloo, Tower Master of Metropolis, he greeted. I have been waiting for your arrival, Michael Vanderbilt. Your mentor has told me all about you. My mentor? He asked. Ah, you mean Cerberus? The man exactly. You don't know how much I've cursed that name for not telling me about you properly. If I had known you were such a talented mystic user, then I would have welcomed you to Metropolis myself. Lucius walked forward and joined him in the balcony overlooking the rows of tables with chessboards. There is one thing I'm curious about. Your talent definitely gives you the privilege to become a mystic master. Why have you not? No offense, but I have better things to do, he replied honestly. I feel like I can make a larger difference in the world if I continue with my company. But if I become a mystic master, I'll be forced in a secluded study away from the world I so desperately want to change. Lucius looked at him and nodded. One could see in his eyes that he was dismayed that such a once-in-a-lifetime genius like Michael wasn't part of the guild. It is true that mystic master students have a similar training to monks, but with your talent, I'm sure exceptions can be made. They'd be more than willing to give you leeway to do what you want, and still be part of the guild. Michael shrugged. I don't want to be tied down, but I am planning on visiting the Guild of Arcana in the future. The Tower Master was saddened for a second, but his eyes lit up once he realized something. Yes, do that. I won't tell them about your talents just yet. I want to see the look on those old geezers' faces when you show them yourself. There was an almost evil look on Lucius' face that reminded him of Cerberus. It seemed that Tower Masters had a natural tendency to become weirdos. In truth, Lucius was just doing what Cerberus had done to him. He wanted to get satisfaction by letting those geezers experience the same heart-stopping shock he experienced when he first found out about Michael. It was a cycle of schadenfreude. Anyway, what brings you here? Lucius asked, his mood brightened. Just say the word and we'll bring you what you want. Well, I do have a request, he said. I saw that the wizards in the auction game could create very realistic homunculi, and I wanted to find out how they're doing it. Lucius pursed his lips. To tell you the truth, our homunculi are made out of a magical skeletal structure that is proprietary to the Guild of Arcana. And that, I can't divulge. That was a shame. But he didn't give up. All he had to do was to see the skeletal structure once, and he could have ChatJK5 copy it within a second. Can I see it? Lucius thought about it for a moment before an idea struck his mind. How about we have a bet? If you win, I'll let you see the skeletal structure. And if I win, then we can get a reservation for your automobiles once you can sell them. Sounds reasonable, he replied. What's the game? The Tower Master flashed a proud smile before pointing down at the chessboards. We'll play chess. Do you know about it? Michael could only chuckle to himself. 30 minutes later, Lucius sat on the table, grabbing his head in frustration. The Tower Master is losing. Did you see Michael's moves? It's like he knew the Tower Master's moves in advance. I think it's better if Lucius surrenders his king now to save his dignity. In this magic tower, Lucius was considered to be the best player among the wizards. No one could beat him. That was why he was so confident betting against Michael. But now, with most of his pieces already off the board leaving behind only a few pawns and his king, he was most certainly done for. How? Michael moved his queen, creating a checkmate. And that's the game, he said, shaking Lucius' hand. I thought this was your first time playing? Michael shrugged. I never said that. You just assumed. How? Oh, it's because I invented chess. Lucius froze in place, before his head slowly turned towards Michael. What? Yeah. Chess was one of the first products of the Reborn company. He turned the chessboard over, letting Lucius see the R brand etched into the very wood. As the realization dawned on Lucius, his jaws opened wide. "So, can I get the magic skeleton now?" he asked. A few seconds later, a shout could be heard reverberating out of the magic tower, surprising the pedestrians walking in front. "Curse you, Cerberus!" Lucius could see Cerberus' face in the sky, rolling on the clouds because of his uncontrolled laughter. He purposefully neglected to tell him that Michael was the one who invented chess. "Michael, when you get to the Guild of Arcana, you better not tell any of them that you invented chess. Okay?" There was a manic look on Lucius' face. He was desperate to continue the cycle of shock. Cerberus got outsmarted by Michael in chess, which he passed down to Lucius. And now, like a curse, Lucius wanted to pass it down towards someone else and take the burden off himself. Michael got a first-hand look at the Magic Tower's vaults. There were a lot of treasures located inside here, which all emanated magic like a spell. And at the end of the vault, he saw a couple of glass containers lined up against the wall. Most of them contained inactive homunculi. Their faceless and featureless expressions would have been the perfect display for horror houses in a theme park. At the very center seemed to be a skeletal figure, but not one typical of humans. It looked like a stick figure with one long stick as the torso and the head, with 4 limbs attached to make up the arms and the legs. ChatJK5, have you seen it properly now? Yes. I have stored and analyzed its magic theory. You will be able to replicate it using your own magic. A surge of information washed over his mind, giving him a basic understanding of the skeletal structure that gave the homunculi a realistic depiction. I see. So it's using the stacked effect of magic, just like the technique Braxton used. Now that he knew how simple it was, he knew that he'd be able to customize it to any shape he wanted, including sea monsters, current and ancient alike. Chapter 649, Seer. While Michael prepared for the creation of his Merman theme park, the other companies in Metropolis weren't just sitting still. They were preparing. Specifically, they were getting ready to welcome a specific group of mermen rumored to visit Metropolis in the coming days. And if those rumors were to be believed, then they could expect whales to start landing in Metropolis. This name was not due to the mermen's physical attributes, but instead because of their wealth. They had sand dollars aplenty. Meanwhile, far east of Metropolis, there was a large convoy consisting of about 20 or so carriages, each enough to house about 4 humans in total. However, the passengers on this convoy weren't human at all. They were beast folk, specifically, mermen. The direction of their travels headed straight towards Metropolis, but it would probably take them at least half a month before they arrived. Since they were beings used to the comfort of the raging sea, these mermen took frequent stops along the way. They were uncomfortable with the seats. As in the water, they simply just swam to their destination and were practically weightless. They took camp along a clearing in the forest. And instead of building a campfire to keep them warm, they instead dug a huge hole in the ground and used their powers to create a small pond where they could take a dip to refresh the moisture in their bodies. The children basked in the water, finally in a good mood, while the adults prepared a simple salad containing seaweed, corals, and a little bit of preserved krill for their protein. As they prepared their camp, one merman had a little bit of trouble taking a stone out of the ground. "Reed, can you help?" When a problem occurred, they always turned to Reed, who was in charge of the whole convoy. He was a middle-aged merman with distinct red scales surrounding his face, and a tall stature. Stature within the merman community was dictated by the amount of raised shark teeth-like bumps on their skin, acting as sort of a tattoo. It was a symbol of growth in their Tao heart. The more bumps, the more respected he was. And Reed was the merman who had the most, with his entire body littered with shark teeth-like bumps. After Reed helped the merman, he turned to his wife. "Our trip to the surface world has been worth it so far, just from seeing the looks on our children's faces. Kids' Tao hearts can be easily stimulated. This little experience will do wonders for them," he said. His wife showed a pained smile on her face. "It's true. I just hope that it's the same for our little girl." They both walked towards their carriage and peeked into the partition. Inside the dark room, they saw a little mermaid girl shriveled up in the corner. She wasn't sleeping, as she had her eyes open, but it didn't look like she was alive either. She might be awake, but there was no fire within her eyes. "Nixie, dear? Why don't you play outside with the other children?" Reed asked his daughter. "They're having a lot of fun out there. We can escort you there, if you'd like," said her mother. But Nixie didn't react. She just kept staring out into the darkness, not reacting to any stimuli. Both Reed and his wife could only sigh in dismay. They were both about to close the blinders when they heard a grunt from Nixie. They quickly turned around and saw her clutching her heart in pain. As unfortunate as it was, this was the only emotion she had ever exhibited throughout her life. "Nixie!" Reed shouted in alarm, quickly coming over to hold his daughter. "We need help over here." She needs her medicine. It wasn't long before the other mermen in their group gathered at his call. An old mermaid, one with eyes blurry like that of a pearl, boarded their carriage and sat next to Nixie. She examined the child, touching the heart that was causing pain. Nixie flinched, showing a distressed reaction. "How is it, old seer?" Reed asked. "Her condition is getting worse?" said old seer, shaking her head. "Her Tao heart is deteriorating faster and faster. The only way for a Tao heart to continue growing was if they were stimulated with new experiences. One of the ways to accomplish that was through combat. However, Nixie's Tao heart was far too weak to exercise. She couldn't even get up off her bed. Unfortunately, that only caused her Tao heart to deteriorate even further. It seemed was an unwinnable situation. Nixie's parents held each other's hands in worry. "Should we go back? Is the surface world too much for her to bear?" Reed asked worriedly. The old seer sighed. "No, it is much better for her to continue her journey in the surface world. Her Tao heart would have grown a lot weaker if not for our trip here." Reed gritted his teeth. If only he could exchange all of his wealth, his power, and his influence to cure his daughter, then he would do so in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, this Tao heart disease was something that not even the great seas could solve. Out of pure desperation, they journeyed out of Atlantis and into the surface world in search for an answer. "Will our daughter really be healed here?" Reed asked. The old seer's pearl-like eyes glowed, with the raging seas and terrifying currents reflected off its surface. "Yes," she answered. "The seas dictate that the cure for your daughter's disease will be found in the surface world." This gave Reed the confidence to continue their journey. "The only person who can give us the answers we want is the world's greatest healer, Sinclair," he said. "We shall head to Metropolis as soon as possible. One of Sinclair's students has set up their own apothecary branch there." Seeing the surety in Reed's eyes, the old seer gave him a warning. "I'd like to remind you that the answers you're looking for may not be in the place you've been searching in. Prophecies were never as direct as possible." From the old seer's experience, it was almost impossible to guess the truth behind those predictions. After all, it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It was even possible that the person who would cure Nixie may not be a healer at all. In an office filled with exotic plants and herbs growing along the walls and the cabinets, Aerith showed an expression of pure focus. She picked up a vial of a glowing violet liquid and gently poured it into a beaker containing water. As the two liquids mixed, an explosive reaction occurred that broke the beaker into countless shards. "Another failed one," she cursed. "Mrs., I do not think that this is possible," one of her assistants said gently, trying not to offend her. "There has never been a way to artificially strengthen a Tao heart." Aerith's goals were ambitious. As a chemist, she believed that she could solve Beastfolk's Tao heart problem through her concoctions alone. It was an arrogance she learned from Sinclair herself. Unfortunately, no matter how much she tried, she just couldn't find the solution. Chapter 650, Fisherman. Michael looked at the map in his hands given to him by Reptar. This detailed the exact location of the fishing village that was supposed to have the preserved sea monsters that they caught from the ocean. He immediately hopped on his drone and began piloting it through the skies. Thankfully, it seemed that the control room in the pocket dimension could display the directions that ChatJK5 made for him with the map. The trip was quite long since he had to go all the way to the edge of the royal continent, but he was quite comfortable in his subspace. He could even take a short nap to pass the time. Eventually, he was awoken by a ringing bell inside the control room, which indicated that he had reached his destination. He looked at the drone's perspective and saw a quaint little village propped up in a wooden dock just by the sea. Boats of all sizes were tied down on the posts, which seemed to all be specialized for speed. Most of them looked like a big kayak with wooden poles attached to the sides for better balance. It was the middle of the day, so there were quite a lot of fishermen unloading their catches in the morning. They hauled nets with fishes squirming inside, trying to get out. His eyes narrowed when he realized that some of the things they caught weren't exactly a normal fish. There was one fisherman who had to get help from 10 other fishermen to unload a net onto the dock. Mind you, the fish seemed to have already been caught, but it was still fighting with an unrelenting tenacity and strength that simply exhausted the fishermen. Eventually, the fishermen wrangled the catch onto the dock, showing that they seemed to have caught a monstrous squid-like monster that was even bigger than a colossal squid from his previous life. It seemed to be much stronger too, as the monster whipped one of its tentacles in retaliation from its captors, bending a thick metal post on the dock. If it weren't for the fisherman tying up its tentacles with a masterful technique that prevented it from moving, then it would have caused tremendous amounts of damage in the dock, causing the whole thing to collapse and destroying tens of fishermen houses built on top of it. Now that looks like a 3-star monster, and it seems suitable enough for my roller coasters. He looked down and saw the fisherman who caught it to enter a rundown wooden building with the sign, Quint's Tackle Shop, And it just so happens that the very person Reptar recommended him was the very same man. He quickly got out of the drone and floated down into Quint's shop. As he got closer to the fishing village, the 3-star squid monster seemed to have noticed his presence and cowered under his natural pressure. The fisherman immediately noticed that something was wrong. After all, the fierce and unrelenting monster that could destroy a whole village wouldn't suddenly turn limp because it was captured. They followed the direction where its constricted pupils were directed at, leading them to look up at the golden-haired boy slowly floating down towards them. Holy smokes! A boy! He ignored all their stares and went over to Quint's shop, with a bell ringing from the door as soon as he opened it. The distinct smell of pungent fish hit his nose. It was intense. It was so bad that he had to use magic to dispel the stench from his nose, making him wonder how anyone could live in this place. In fact, it seemed that he was the only one bothered with the smell. There were a few other people here who seemed to be looking around the bait section of Quint's shop. Is this the right place? The whole shop was decorated with fishing equipment, some rusted, some scratched, and some with minimal wear. All along the walls he saw trophies of preserved fish heads displayed proudly, with its species and the date he caught it carved in the wooden frame. This is definitely the right place. What do you want? He turned forward and saw a grumpy-looking old man with a mullet and an unkempt mustache lounging on his chair as if he wanted to sleep in it. Are you Quint? None other, the man replied. I heard that you're the man to speak to when looking for preserved sea monsters. Quint opened his eyes and took a look at Michael. How did you know about that? Reptar sent me, he replied. That got a reaction from Quint, making him stand up and gaze at Michael a lot more closely. That boy sent ya, huh? You must be some kind of a big shot, Quint commented, rubbing mustache. He never lets anyone know about me, that disloyal son of mine. He's your son? Michael asked, surprised. Yup. Now what do you want? 3-star? 4-star. Michael would have wanted to learn more about their situation, but first things first, he had to secure the monsters. 7-star at the minimum, but I want anything you have. The stronger the better. It'll be great if you have those that are in perfectly preserved conditions. Quint tapped his hand on the wooden table while in thought. 7-star? Well, now you've piqued my interest. While I do not have any high-leveled sea monsters preserved in pristine conditions, I can certainly try and make that for you. You're going to be hunting for them? It's a challenge, Quint said, smiling and showing his missing teeth. And I'm not one to back away from such a dare. Quint picked up his fishing equipment and began preparing for his challenge. You can expect the result in a month, he said, putting multiple rations on his bag. A month? Does it really take that long? That was bad because the whole parade might have already ended before he got the preserved monster parts he needed. It usually takes just a few days, but I have a lot of pending orders from my other customers, Quint said. Just then, the bell inside the shop rang as a few newcomers entered the room. It seemed that they weren't local to this village. After all, their attire signaled their stature to be of someone who lived in a town or even a city. Not only that, but they also weren't used to the stench of fish inside the shop. Sir Quint, I'm here to add another ton of fish in my order, a young man with blonde hair demanded. Quint nodded. You'll get it in 2 months. 2 months? Why the hell would it take that long? Because after your original order, I've got a new order from this young bloke over here, said Quint. It's first come, first served. However, the blonde man seemed unsatisfied with that. He fumed before turning to Michael and glaring at him. You have to rescind your order, he demanded. Michael tilted his head. And why would I do that? Because I'm more important than you. Don't you know that I'm going to be moving to Metropolis soon? I'm about to get my permit. Chapter 651, Merman Arrival. Your permit? Michael asked. Yes, after my test, then I'll be able to move my company to Metropolis, the greatest territory in all of the royal continent. The blonde man praised. Of course, the other people beside him immediately went in with their support. That's right. Our boss is going to be the next big thing over there. First, it's the permit. Then, it's the minor factions. And after that, it's the major factions. We're destined at the top. Think of it this way. You'll be helping someone that will eventually stand with the likes of Alaric Goldstone. That is an honor you should be proud of. Their eyes glazed with praise and adoration as they talked about the Alaric Goldstone. Humph, you don't even know who that is. The blonde boy asked derisively. He's only the strongest leader in all of Metropolis. He has no equal. Even that potbowl guy is no match to him. Michael couldn't help but chuckle to himself. He couldn't believe he met people who were certified Alaric fans. What are you laughing about? Come outside. I'll teach you something about strength. Let's duel. The blonde boy and his entourage walked outside, eyeing Michael as they did. Michael, feeling that this was quite amusing, followed them outside. "This will be a good practice for me," said the blonde boy. "I'll need to sharpen my dueling skills if I'm going to compete in Metropolis." "Are you sure you want to duel me?" Michael asked. "Of course. No backing out now," replied the blonde man. Michael shrugged and waited for the blonde man to finish his stretching routine. "Okay, I'm ready," said the blonde man. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the fishing village, there was a man who was running towards the dock with an excited look on his face. In his hands was a folded-up newspaper straight from the company. Eventually, he reached Quint's shop and found his leader facing off against some kind. "What's happening?" he asked his teammates. "Our boss is going to teach that boy a lesson. Anyway, did you get it?" The man proudly showed off the roll of newspaper in his hands. "Yup, and I haven't read it yet so that we could all see what happened at the auction together." These innocent and naive groups of people were extreme fanatics of Metropolis and Alaric. They consumed anything and everything related to them. So, when they heard that the auction had occurred a few nights ago, they were very excited to read about the exploits and wondrous feats that Alaric performed in the auction. However, it was quite hard to get into Metropolis, so it was only now that they got a copy of the newspaper the day after the auction. And now, they were finally ready to read it. All four of them opened the newspaper with bated breaths, with their faces glowing with excitement. Finally, they saw it. On the front page was the illustration of the boy called Michael Vanderbilt, the wondrous genius who was able to beat Alaric in the final game of the auction. They looked up at the boy just a few meters away from them, then looked back at the newspaper. And no matter how many times they looked at it, the two were exactly the same. A dawning realization came to them. Wait! But just as they issued their warning, they suddenly saw their leader get blown back towards them, toppling them all like they were bowling pins. After learning about his true identity, the blonde man and the rest of his entourage sat on their knees and begged for forgiveness. They were so scared to think that they'd angered the person who was able to defeat the Alaric Goldstone. And not only him, but it seemed that the person in front of them was able to go toe-to-toe against all of the major faction leaders in Metropolis. On the bright side of all this, the blonde man was more than happy to delay his order, so that Michael could receive his preserved sea monster carcass a lot sooner than he expected. Thanks to that, his plans for the roller coaster would go as planned. After finishing all of his preparations, Michael immediately transported himself to the parched lands. As expected of his Rebornian Imagineers, they'd already been hard at work preparing for the Merman theme park. "Boss!" Kong greeted him with a smile. "We're planning on putting the 2 roller coasters here and there." Kong pointed towards the empty space right next to the original roller coaster. It was the most convenient spot. However, Michael had another idea. He wanted to build it in a separate location, one far away from the current roller coaster. "We should build it on the opposite side of the nation of Reborn. That way, we can plan ahead for the other attractions we're going to build." His idea was that Rebornians and tourists alike could see the Merman theme park on their right side, and the normal theme park on the left side. "Ah, I see," Kong said, understanding his vision. With a little bit of brainstorming with the other engineers, they were able to create a new floor plan for the theme park. Michael took a look and was satisfied with what he saw. They didn't just build the roller coasters, they built the entire park, complete with the themed walkways, buildings, and even the concession stands. There was even a branch of McTony's Chicken, ready to serve juicy fried snacks while waiting in line. There were a lot of things they needed to build, but for now they were focusing on the roller coasters itself. Michael needed them to be completed before the parade in Metropolis started. A few hours later, large steel pillars floated in the air and were installed into their rightful place, guided by the engineers. "Fairies reporting for duty," Vivi said, saluting to Michael. Thanks to their fairy dust, tons of metals became as light as a feather, making their workload a lot easier. Meanwhile, Reed's convoy of carriages finally arrived at the entrance of Metropolis. Reed and his wife held their daughter's hand as they looked up at the bustling civilization of humans just in front of them. "We just need a little more and we can finally cure you," Reed said to Nixie, squeezing her hand tight. Eventually, he nodded to their driver to continue forwards and finally stepped foot into this vast human city. The human guards made them stop at the gate to inspect the carriage. "Welcome to Metropolis. What is the purpose of your visit?" The guard's eyes widened as he peeked into the carriage, seeing people with scales on their bodies staring back at him. "Mayor, Merman," Reed cleared his throat. "We have come as a visitor to the one called Aerith, from Metropolis branch of Sinclair's Elixir." And used to seeing a merman, the guard just froze in place. It wasn't until Reed cleared his throat again in impatience did he finally react. The guard went back and verified with their records that Aerith did indeed schedule visitors to her colony. "Very well, sir. You may proceed." The group of mermen entered Metropolis, with only the cure in their minds. Chapter 652. Apothecary Visit. Reed's visit into Metropolis wasn't official. They weren't part of the horde of tourists that would be welcomed with a parade. That was why they went largely unnoticed by the general public. If one didn't peek through the curtains of their carriage, then many would assume that they were just any other convoy of humans. After all, unlike the other tourists who had a lot of time to spend to relax and enjoy Metropolis, Reed and his family were on a time limit. Nixie's Dow heart was getting weaker and weaker by the day. They needed the help of a professional, the very best of the best. And that was none other than Sinclair's Elixir, a global conglomerate headed by the miraculous healer, Sinclair. Their carriage stopped as they reached what seemed to be a large gardenscape in the middle of Metropolis. Instead of walls, the whole estate was lined with shrubbery that was neatly cut into a tall rectangular shape. The strong scent of medicine wafted through the air as precious herbs and plants were carefully positioned throughout the garden. Just then, they saw a human watering the plants with a sprinkler can. "We're here to see Aerith," Reed said to him. The farmer looked at him and nodded, before casting a magic circle in his hands. Eventually, the shrubbery wall opened up, allowing their carriages to go inside. Reed and his convoy continued on before they finally reached the apothecary. At the very entrance, they saw a young woman with pink hair tied up in a ponytail waiting for their arrival. Reed immediately got out of their carriage, carrying Nixie in his arms. He went up the stairs and begged, "Please save my daughter." Aerith looked at the mermaid child, her eyes narrowing as she realized the severity of her condition. "According to your letters, it seemed that her condition worsened even more than before," she said. Reed had been trying to contact Sinclair even before he arrived in the royal continent. However, she was too busy and he was redirected towards one of her pupils, Aerith. "Can you heal her?" Reed asked. Aerith didn't answer. She then took out her mithril relic needle, manifesting the giant frog diva above her. Feeling for her pressure points, Aerith targeted the straight line dividing the child's body. The needle pricked the little mermaid's skin, drawing blood that immediately transformed into a small toad. These frogs made out of pure ability power started to release slime from their body, injecting a healing form into Nixie's skin. The child's expression softened for a second, her pain lessening. But a few moments later, she cringed as she felt another pricking sensation in her Dow heart. Aerith could only shake her head. "I'm powerless," she admitted. "Nixie's disease is on her Dow heart, and we both know that the powers of a Dow heart and abilities are one and the same. If I try to force her healing, her Dow heart would reject it almost immediately and make her condition worse." Reed gritted his teeth. "But don't lose hope yet," she said. "I have asked for my seniors' help on this one. They'll be more equipped to handle this than me." While Michael was overlooking the construction of the roller coasters, he suddenly felt a reaction from one of his shadow clones. He closed his eyes and felt around, eventually realizing that it was coming from the clones he left behind in the Duchess castle. "She's trying to contact me." He immediately transported himself back into Metropolis, standing face to face with Duchess Regina herself. They were sitting in her dining hall, with plenty of food and drinks served on the table. "Did you call me here for a meal, Duchess?" "No," she said, using her handkerchief to wipe off RD soda from her lips. "I called you for something better." He was intrigued. "My soldiers have just informed me that a group of mermen has entered Metropolis," she said. "Mermen?" "Yes. They came here ahead of the parade and immediately went towards our branch of Sinclair's Elixir. Aerith is probably talking to them as we speak." "They went straight to an apothecary?" "Why?" The Duchess shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. All I know is that the man leading the convoy is called Reed, and he has a lot of sway within the merman community. If he tells mermen to do something, then they'll most likely do what he says." He could hear the hidden implication in the Duchess' words. She was trying to hint at the fact that Reed was a linchpin to his plan of getting the attention of all the other mermen in the royal continent. "Thanks for the info, Duchess." "No problem. Fufufu. Just make sure to invite me to one of your projects next time." He looked at her and saw the hidden threat in her eyes. It seemed that she had finally learned about the nation of Reborn, and she was going to hate it if he didn't invite her inside. "All right, Duchess. I'll give you a personal tour of the parched lands once my projects are over," he promised her. "You teleport me there," she demanded. "Even with the speed of your automobiles, I don't want to spend weeks on end just sitting in a box. I'm too old for this." "Fine. We'll take the whole royal family too. It'll be a family vacation. On me." The Duchess' face visibly lightened up. "Fufu. I'm looking forward to it. I better be careful with this one." The reason why he hadn't voluntarily told the Duchess about the nation of Reborn was because he didn't want her to become like Duke Stelmane. Even now, the Duke had been staying in the nation of Reborn and completely neglected his duties in Angora City. He had enjoyed his time in paradise for far too much, and it looked like he had no intentions of ever leaving it. He could only imagine the kind of chaos that would unfold in Metropolis if the Duchess disappeared for months and years on end. He shivered. After the Duchess' timely hint, he went back to the nation of Reborn to look for Serena. He found them and all the other mermen lounging in the Lamia's riverside property, basking in the sun and having a lot of fun. They had decided to stay in Metropolis for the time being, especially after he revealed the roller coasters to them. And despite not being used to the cultures of the surface world, the mermen were quick to love the nation of Reborn in its entirety. "Hey Serena," he called out to her. Serena turned around and waved at him with a big smile on her face. "Whoa," he said, blocking his eyes with his face quickly blushing. It seemed that she had relaxed far too much in the river, as she didn't seem to be wearing any clothes. If it weren't for her curly red hair, then he would have seen. "Enough," he said, slapping himself silly. Why aren't you wearing anything?" he asked her. "What do you mean? I am wearing my clothes." She had turned into a full mermaid. Chapter 653, Apothecaries. Michael carefully peeked at gaps in between his fingers and saw that underneath her hair, Serena was wearing a bikini made out of shells that perfectly covered her natural mounds. "Oh," he said, awkwardly laughing. "I thought you were—" "Never mind. What brings you here? Has the roller coaster been finished?" she asked, unable to hide her excitement. She moved closer to him, making him recoil back in embarrassment. No. I'm here for something different. I heard that someone called Reed entered Metropolis quite recently. Know anything about him?" As soon as he said that, Serena's face turned sad. "Nixie," she muttered. "Nixie. That's his daughter," she explained. "I told you about our curse with Dow hearts, right? Usually, its deterioration only happens once beast folks are of advanced age, when their bodies could no longer keep up with their spirit. However, there are some rare instances in which children would get affected by the curse of the Dow heart. Nixie is one such particular case. Her Dow heart is extremely fragile, so much so that she couldn't even swim around on her own. And if she tried to exercise and try to strengthen her Dow heart, the curse would immediately act up and make her feel an immense amount of pain. Even though he hadn't met this Nixie person yet, he already felt sorry for her. The fact that she couldn't even go out and do things on her own meant that her childhood was severely limited. It's a shame, really. There are hundreds of merman children who die from this curse yearly, and most of them wouldn't last to their 10th birthday. And unfortunately, Nixie is about to turn 10 soon. That's probably why Reed entered the surface world in the first place. He wanted to find a solution for his daughter's sickness. He'd do anything to save her. Michael finally realized why they headed straight for Aretha's apothecary shop as soon as they landed in Metropolis. They hoped that they could save her. Now, although he wasn't sure that they couldn't heal her Dow heart, he was pretty sure that he could, at the very least, help her condition. The roller coaster would be the perfect therapy for the Little Mermaid. She'd get all the benefits of experiencing a burst of emotions, while remaining in a completely still position as the roller coaster train rode through all the ups and downs of the ride. She could exercise her Dow heart without the risk. "Do you think the roller coaster can help her?" Serena's eyes widened with realization. She grabbed his shoulders and grabbed him in a big hug. "That's right. You have the roller coasters." She realized the perfect solution to Nixie's problems as well. "We have to go there now. I'll vouch for you. They know my reputation." Meanwhile, in Aretha's apothecary shop, Reed and his wife patiently waited in a dark room, with incense burning around them and creating a medical aroma. They had a worried expression as they saw their daughter laying on the floor, with a bunch of herbs and liquid concoctions rubbed on her skin. Opposite them was Aerith, who was continually setting up the room, grounding up a few crystals in a bowl and feeding it to little Nixie. "I have sedated her, making her Dow heart beat as slow as possible to lessen its strain," she said to them. "Are they going to come yet?" Reed asked impatiently. "They know that this is an emergency. I'm sure they're doing their best to arrive as soon as possible," Aerith assured them. Just then, the door to the room burst wide open as two people walked inside. A middle-aged woman in her late 30s immediately walked towards Nixie and bent down to inspect her. She didn't waste any time for greetings or niceties. Behind her was another woman, who seemed to be at the same age as Aerith. She held a bag in her hands, which seemed to be filled with medical instruments based on the bulge of the outline. "Senior Juniper," Aerith greeted the older woman. "How is the child?" Juniper narrowed her eyes as she prodded at Nixie's chest. Her expression narrowed as she saw the child wince in pain just from a simple touch. "It's good that you called me here as soon as possible. The curse on this child had advanced far enough for her life to be in danger. Theodora, get me my sage." Theodora, the woman she came with, quickly ruffled through the bag and gave her a few leaves as instructed. Juniper accepted the leaves and began casting her spells in quick succession. As Reed watched Juniper, he couldn't help but ask, "Was Sinclair unavailable to help us?" "She is currently in another continent," Aerith answered. "But she has sent the second-best apothecary in the entire world." Senior Juniper is Master Sinclair's right-hand woman. We can trust that your daughter is placed in the right hands. Juniper's casting finished, creating a pillar of light that surrounded Nixie, who became engulfed with small light particles that got absorbed directly into her body. A few seconds later, her spell subsided. Nixie's expression visibly softened. Then, she opened her eyes, groggily looking around the room as if she was looking for something. Dad. Nixie. Reed called out to her, excited. You healed her. This was the first time in years that his daughter had spoken. It was a miracle. But despite this joyous occasion, Juniper, the woman who made this miracle happen in the first place, didn't celebrate at all. This is merely a delay, she said. I have healed the damage in her Tao heart, but it will continue to degrade if the root cause of her disease is not fixed. And can you do it? Reed asked, desperate. Unfortunately, the root cause of her problem is the curse of a Tao heart. It is not something that I nor Sinclair can fix. Reed was gut-wrenched. They traveled all the way here, yet they still couldn't find a cure for their daughter. It made him want to lose all hope. However, the look on his daughter's face instantly made him regain it. We're not going to give up on you, sweetheart. If they had to spend the rest of their lives in the surface world to give their daughter a brief moment of solace, then so be it. Just then, they heard a knock on the door. One of Aretha's gardeners peeked inside. Miss Aerith, there's someone here to see you. It is Princess Serena. Reed perked up. The princess? What is she doing here? Aerith nodded to his gardener to let the visitors enter her estate. It wasn't long before Princess Serena came inside the room with a boy right beside her. It was none other than Michael. Michael? Aerith gasped. Why are you with the princess? Serena greeted everyone with a bow. I'm sorry, princess, but we are currently in the middle of Nixie's treatment, said Reed. The princess nodded with a smile. That's exactly why I'm here. We may have found a cure for your daughter. The three apothecaries immediately reacted to her words with doubt. They knew that the curse of the Tao heart was as permanent as the heaven and the earth. Chapter 654. A cure? Really? Reed asked, already hopeful. Yes, and it's because of this person right here. Michael, Serena said, introducing the golden-haired boy right next to her. That's impossible, rebuked Theodora. Even Master Sinclair has not been able to find a way to solve the curse of the beastfolk. Theodora noticed that Michael was only barely in his teens. She would have had a much better chance of inventing the cure rather than him. Even Aerith couldn't help but express her doubt. Let's not get ahead of ourselves and set up these expectations. Princess Serena. Michael, can you please explain your claims? But just as Serena was about to explain, an intense shockwave suddenly erupted from the room, causing the plants and candles to be knocked over, and the incense to be put out. Michael felt the Godforge pieces in his heart react to the shockwave. This was not born from a physical explosion. This was caused by none other than the eruption of ability power. Everyone turned to Nixie, the very source of the shockwave. The little mermaid was now floating in the air, with droplets of water manifesting in the air and revolving around her. Reed immediately went over to his daughter to hold her, but the water droplets suddenly morphed and created a thin wall that rejected his advances. He fell on his back, wincing from the pain in his hands. Just from that brief contact with the water, he had suffered severe burns in his hands. Even without using his ability drone vision, Michael could see the aura surrounding the little mermaid. She was exhibiting ability power tremendously, much more than what a normal child like her should be able to use. It could practically rival Alaric or Potball's ability power intensity. Right now, she was exhibiting a 9th stage strength. What's happening? Reed asked the apothecaries. Juniper approached the floating Nixie with a frown. The worst possible situation has just occurred, she said. It seems that your daughter has just awakened as a blessed. Nixie had just turned 10 years old, which meant that she was at the age where she would find out if she was blessed with the Ocean King's power or not. Usually, those with the curse of the Tao heart turned out to be part of the unblessed group of mermen, so Reed never even thought that this would happen to his daughter. What's going to happen to her? Her Tao heart is currently getting flooded with power from your supreme being, Juniper explained. This should have baptized her body, making it stronger to accommodate the new power in her Tao heart. However, her Tao heart is already weak from the curse. Any additional power it receives will only cause further damage in her body. If this continues on, her Tao heart will explode. We'll have to operate on her or else she'll die. Reed was faced with a tough decision. Now, surgery wasn't that uncommon in this world. After all magnetics had to go through this process every time they needed to add Godforge pieces in their hearts. Humans have made strides to make that process as safe as possible. However, this surgery was a completely different matter. First of all, she was a merman. She had a different physiology than what these apothecaries were used to. Secondly, Operating on a Tao heart while undergoing a blessing could cause the power in her body to suddenly leak out of her heart with extreme force and pressure. Can you save her? Juniper took a breath. I'm not sure. However, if we don't operate on her now, then her death will be guaranteed. Reed gritted his teeth before nodding. Do it. Do whatever you have to do to save my daughter. With the consent from the parent, Juniper immediately rushed into action. She raised her hand, and Theodora immediately knew to bring a sharp knife to her palms. I'm starting the surgery, Juniper said, moving towards the floating Nixie. Watching this, Michael couldn't help but fidget in place. They're having surgery in this unsanitary place? It didn't even look like Juniper washed the knife that she was going to cut Nixie with. Wait, he said, interrupting them. You should sterilize the entire surgery room first or else it could cause complications. Theodora looked at him, offended. I'm sorry, but we are professional apothecaries. Not only that, but Senior Juniper herself is the second best healer in the entire world. She knows what she's doing without someone giving her advice. It did seem incredibly rude for Michael to have interrupted them, especially since they knew he had no experience with medicine or healing at all. But of course, he did have the knowledge of his previous life. And even if he wasn't a doctor, he knew that sterilization was one of the most important things to do in surgery. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Theodora said. This is a time-sensitive matter, and we can't have. Theodora was cut off by Juniper, who raised her hand and stopped her words. What do you suggest we do? She asked Michael. And before Theodora could object, Michael reached into his pockets and clicked a switch, revealing his Unity saber. With the glowing Unity sword in his hands, he approached Juniper. The old apothecary didn't flinch, nor did she feel intimidated by his weapon. She simply let him do what he planned to do. Michael took the knife in her hands and gently used his Unity saber to skim the very surface of her blade, eliminating all bacteria. After that, he casted a spell that created an isolated rectangular box, giving just enough freedom for Juniper to operate on Nixie safely. Watching this, Theodora couldn't help but express her doubt. Senior Juniper, why would you yield to the boy's whims? Is it not important to fix Nixie's heart as soon as possible? It's because he may be right, Juniper said, not taking her eyes off of Michael. What do you mean? Sinclair has long hypothesized that the diseases and complications brought about during surgery were caused by these creatures too small to be seen by the naked eye. She said that the only way to ensure the safety of the patient while in surgery was to eliminate those creatures and prevent their spread into the body. She had yet to publish her findings about this because she has yet to create a foolproof way of eliminating those creatures. But it seemed that this kid solved it all on his own. Sterilization. Juniper couldn't help but be amused at this unknown kid in front of her. Sinclair would be very amused to meet such a boy. Can we get on with the surgery now? Reed asked worriedly. Juniper was about to enter the surgery box, when Michael interrupted yet again. There's just one thing left. We need anesthesia. It's a way for her to not feel any pain during surgery, he explained. Nixie was already experiencing pain every day. She didn't have to feel someone cutting through her body. Chapter 655. Modern Medicine. What? Theodora doubted. There's no way that you found. But again, Juniper stopped her from continuing her words. Although she agreed with Theodora that no one had found a natural alternative to numb the pain of surgery, she couldn't help but believe that the boy really might have found the solution. She wanted to see what he could come up with. ChatJK5, can you? Here's the instructions needed to create general anesthesia. I have modified it to fit with the physiology of Nixie specifically. Thankfully, it seemed that all the ingredients he needed were already present in the room. After all, this was an apothecary store. They had an abundance of herbs, plants, and all kinds of concoctions made for medicine. With a simple telekinetic spell, he gathered all of the ingredients in front of him, grinding them down, extracting them, and mixing them all together in the specific way ChatJK5 told him. Aerith and Theodora watched as his strange and seemingly arbitrary collection of herbs turned into a milky white liquid with unknown effects. Juniper, on the other hand, was more knowledgeable of the plants he used and was able to follow through with the logic of his choices. So he's using synthetic compounds. That's genius, she muttered in amazement. And with a small gesture from Michael, the anesthesia floated over to Nixie and got absorbed directly into her skin. Nixie immediately felt drowsy before eventually falling asleep. The ability power water surrounding her stopped sloshing around, becoming very still. It seemed that the anesthesia also sedated the power within her Tao heart, making the surgery a lot easier than before. It worked, Theodora exclaimed, shocked and in disbelief. Even when using magic or ability power, it was impossible to sedate the natural powers of a Tao heart to this extent. Miss Juniper, please continue, Michael said, bowing out. Now that he had done his job, he immediately stepped out and let the true professionals do their work. Even with ChatJK5 by his side, He wasn't sure if he could do a better job than the second-best healer in the entire world. Juniper snapped out of her stupor immediately and focused on the patient in front of her. She stepped inside the surgery box, with her entire body getting sterilized from bacteria. Once she was ready, she took out her blade and began the operation. With a quick but precise movement, she created a cut in Nixie's chest, exposing the Dao heart inside. A normal, healthy Dao heart was one that was continuously pumping blood and ability power throughout a person's body. And because of its importance, it was usually protected by a thick bone that wrapped around the entire heart like a casing. Nixie's heart was weak and deflated, pumped out of rhythm and with a weak pulse. Its surface didn't show a healthy red shade, but a darkened violet one instead. The parts that had deteriorated showed a blackish color with absolutely no movement at all. And the bone case of her heart had completely withered away, leaving it to be exposed. "This is the most important and the most dangerous part," Juniper said. Her job was simple. All she had to do was find the holes in Nixie's heart and patch her up before the ability power that was pouring inside of her completely ripped her body from the inside out. However, what complicated this situation was that the holes were located inside her heart and gave no clue as to where it could possibly be. This meant that she had to open up Nixie's Dao heart out in the open. Now, with Michael's sterilization technique, this could be considered to be quite safe. However, the infection of the Dao heart wasn't the problem. It was the infection by the Dao heart that they had to worry about. Once Juniper made the cut, the intense amount of ability power inside it would spew out like a broken pipe, causing mayhem and destruction everywhere. Not only that, but they had to make sure that not too much ability power would leak out or else Nixie wouldn't have enough power to survive. "I'll need your help," Juniper said to Aerith and Theodora. "In order to contain the power in her Dao heart, I'll need a similar power to counteract it." Juniper's awakening as a blessed had a peak power equivalent to a 9th stage body formation magnetic. So, it was only appropriate that the 2 9th stage apothecaries would help her. "Wait, I can help," Michael again interjected. "Oh, come on," Theodora complained. "I can admit that you have good medical knowledge, but your strength simply isn't enough to contain Nixie's power." Even Juniper had to step in and stop Michael. "I think you'll have to sit this one out, young man. It's for your own good. Besides, their powers will be enough to fight against the surge of ability in Nixie's heart." From their perspective, Michael was merely a 4th stage magnetic. It was far too dangerous for him to get in contact with a power 5 stages above him. "You said that we need to contain the ability power that leaks out of her heart. Then I'm your best bet," Michael insisted. And before Theodora could say anything, Aerith interjected. "He's right. He can do this job better than us." Both Theodora and Juniper looked at Aerith as if she was crazy. Why would she let a kid handle powers way above his own? "This is far too dangerous for the likes of him," replied Juniper. "Trust me, he's strong enough," Aerith insisted. "If you want proof, then I'll tell you now that he was able to stand toe-to-toe against Potbowl and Alaric, and even win against them in a game." "Huh, what?" Juniper stared at Aerith. "Alaric? Alaric Goldstone? And Potbowl, as in the student of the Heavenly Knight Kruger? That Potbowl?" As much as Aerith wanted to gush about the incredible scene of their game back from the auction, she knew that they didn't have much time for any flashbacks. "All you have to know is that he can do this. He's the only one who can do this," she insisted. And before Juniper could say anything else, another shockwave erupted out of Nixie's body. Her heart's getting more and more unstable by the second. "I have to start the operation," she insisted. Then, she turned towards Michael and nodded. "I'm trusting you." And without further ado, she pushed her knife into Nixie's Dao heart, creating a small incision on the center. From that small gash, a bright white light emanated outwards, accompanied by a burst of ability power. Water molecules in the air started to turn chaotic, creating droplets out of thin air that suddenly shot out in random directions with the speed of a bullet. Aerith and Theodora immediately protected Reed and his wife from being accidentally hit. "We need to contain the power now," Juniper shouted. The cut was getting bigger as ability power rushed out of Nixie's Dao heart. Michael reached down into his pockets and took out an iron switch and a reverse graphite block, combining them to create a battery. Chapter 656. Suction. Nixie's Dao heart rampaged around the room like a tornado, with water droplets speeding up, becoming thin blades that started to rip apart everything it touched. Her heartbeat slowed down, yet the power surge from her ability power ramped up even higher. This contrast put a lot of strain into her already damaged heart. But just as the Dao heart was about to reach its breaking point, Michael held his hand out and pushed the battery closer to Nixie. Immediately, the ability power got diverted into his battery, as if they were magnetized. The water droplets in the room started to slow down, and the intensity in which it thrashed around got visibly weaker. All the ability power generated by Nixie's awakening were getting instantly siphoned by the battery, giving it no chance to wreak havoc in her Dao heart. Juniper could see Nixie's conditions improving greatly. Even as the ability power generated by her Tao heart increased almost exponentially, it all seemed to be absorbed by Michael's battery. How is that possible? Theodora gasped. Aerith was amazed with her. She finally knew how Michael could survive against those seemingly impossible to dodge attacks. He was absorbing them. Amazing! Juniper muttered. She couldn't believe that a mere fourth-stage magnetic could somehow survive an onslaught from an awakening of this level. His diva and his ability must be incredibly powerful if he could pull off such a feat. Meanwhile, the battery in Michael's hands reached 100%, prompting him to replace it with another immediately. What should we do next? He asked Juniper. The senior apothecary turned her focus on Nixie's Tao heart. Keep on doing whatever you're doing. I'm gonna need to peek inside in order to fix the leaks. As Juniper used her hands to pry the Tao heart open, more and more ability power leaked out, which Michael happily absorbed with his battery. He was like one of those nurses in an operating table with a vacuum that sucked out all the blood to keep the surgery clean. Except, in this case, the blood he was getting was even more valuable than gold. Juniper whispered a few unintelligible words, casting her spells vocally. She began fighting through the ability power in Nixie's heart, fixing and mending the holes that were damaged throughout the process. Everything seemed to be going great, with Nixie's heartbeat slowly returning to normal. Even the ability power that was running amok started to taper off, with signs of slowly becoming weaker and weaker. However, at that moment Nixie's heart ceased. It stopped beating. Damn it! Juniper cursed. Her Tao heart is experiencing failure. What was the cause of this? Michael asked. It's not us who did this. It's Nixie herself. She is subconsciously rejecting the healing that I've been giving her Tao heart. Because of all the pain and suffering she'd experienced, she now wants to get rid of her own Tao heart. Reed and his wife held hands. Don't give up, Nixie. We're here for you. Miss Juniper, what can we do? After going this far, he didn't want all their efforts to suddenly be in vain. Nixie was still a child, and there was still a chance for her to live a normal life. If she could just recover, then he could show her that her Tao heart could be healed from the curse. We'll have to go in there, Juniper said with determination. Go where? He asked. Inside her Tao heart. Inside the very void of her soul. That's where we can find Nixie's subconscious. It's the only way that we can convince her that we're helping her. As soon as Theodora heard this, she immediately objected. Going into a person's subconscious void? It's extremely dangerous, even more so when going alone. I'll go with you. Juniper shook her head. Your cultivation is too strong and may create an adverse reaction from Nixie. But, I can do it alone. It's the only way that we can save her. And we have to save her, Juniper declared. And just as Juniper was about to step forward, Michael volunteered himself. I'm going with you, he said. You'll need someone to absorb the rampaging ability power in her Tao heart. Juniper looked at him, her face serious to convey the severity and danger of the situation. Entering the subconscious void of a person is a dangerous tightrope. It's not just our bodies that are going inside, it's our souls as well. One wrong move, and you can get lost within the chasm of her own mind, never getting out. But despite her warnings, Michael didn't back down. You won't change my mind, he affirmed. Reed and his wife were incredibly moved with Michael's actions. Thank you, Reed said to Michael. Even though we don't know each other, you're already risking your life to save my daughter. Thank you. Kukuku. Dangerous? The void is my playground, Harbinger cackled. But it's good that they think so. They'll be more indebted to you, and you can earn $10 to fund our cultivation. Harbinger being so confident in this endeavor was definitely easing his worries. But he would have still gone through with it even if Harbinger wasn't here with him. Juniper then looked at him, giving him one last chance to back out. Are you ready? I am. Juniper began counting on his fingers before eventually jumping inside Nixie's Tao heart. Her entire body got sucked inside the open heart, allowing her to go directly into Nixie's subconscious. Michael jumped after her. He felt himself get smaller and smaller until he felt like he was falling into a giant white abyss that blinded him for a few seconds. The only thing he could see or hear was the sound of Harbinger cackling with excitement. A few seconds later, his momentum stopped. He opened his eyes and saw himself in a completely different environment. He wasn't in a different room or in a different city. He was underwater, and judging from the fact that there was just an endless abyss of a dark blue ocean everywhere he looked, then he could safely assume that he was probably thousands of meters below sea level. Thankfully, it seemed that this place didn't follow the laws of physics at all since he could still breathe normally underwater. You made it. He turned around and saw Juniper floating behind him. She, too, was breathing normally in the ocean, as if they had become a part of the merman species. The subconscious void of a person is a representation of their very souls. It's their fears, their ambitions, and their excitements. It is everything that makes a person, a person. Usually, someone's subconscious void shows everything that they want or need in life. A mountain of gold, plentiful harvest, etc. As for Nixie, her subconscious features the deep ocean. She has lived her whole life underwater, but was unable to explore it fully because of her curse. That's why the ocean around us looks bleak, featureless, and endless. We need to find her and show her that life is still well worth living. They were supposed to find Nixie in her subconscious, but everywhere Michael looked, he could only see nothing but an endless ocean. Where? His words were interrupted as he saw something dark on the corner of his eyes. He turned around, his eyes widening as his gaze sized up the monstrous shape in front of him. Chapter 657. Sea Monster. A colossal creature larger than imagination stood in front of him. Its two squid-like eyes made the dark blue ocean glow with a tint of red. Multiple skyscraper-sized tentacles squirmed around its mouth, seemingly searching for its next prey to consume. Attached on its back were a pair of bat-like wings, which looked like it could help the creature move at tremendously fast speeds despite its size. He looked down and saw that its body extended down into the dark abyss. What he was looking at was merely the top of its head. He couldn't even see its shoulders. Cthulhu, Juniper muttered with fear. We're lucky that it's just a representation of its body, or else we'll have already been dead meat. He mirrored her apprehension. He felt like he was the size of an ant, looking up at a planet gazing down at him. Why would Nixie have the most terrifying sea creature in the world in her subconscious? He asked her. Juniper stayed silent for a second. I don't know, but it's irregular. We'll have to investigate closer to find out more. Thankfully, Cthulhu was just standing there doing nothing. It made it easier for them to approach this legendary creature without having to worry about whether it would devour them or not. Now what? Where would we find Nixie? Juniper stared at Cthulhu, peering through the giant tentacles and into its mouth. She's inside there. She's inside Tulu? Yes, that's where we'll find her subconscious. Upon closer inspection, he could feel ability power emanating from Cthulhu's mouth. Juniper was right. Nixie's subconscious was hiding inside Cthulhu itself. They both swarmed forward, and as they got closer, Michael was able to comprehend the sheer size and magnitude of the creature in front of him. Just the tentacles themselves were bigger and taller than the skyscrapers in his world. As they got closer, they saw mountain-like teeth around Cthulhu's jaws, with its edge pointed straight towards them. Just don't wander off, Juniper warned him. Of course, he had no intention of having a stroll around Cthulhu's mouth. Entering its body was already adventurous enough. And as they got closer to the mouth of the beast, they suddenly felt the water in front of them rush forward like a river. Both him and Juniper were swept inside Cthulhu's mouth, giving them no time to think about backing out. With just pure darkness around him, he found comfort in the batteries on his heart. Eventually, they saw a tinge of light in the distance. His eyes widened as he saw an entirely new world populated with biofluorescent creatures swimming around them. Fishes glowing with rainbow colors swarm in schools. Squid-like creatures with pulsating lights curiously swam up towards them, and even the corals decorated around them were glowing with neon colors. He thought that this was an amazing sight that was a great contrast to Cthulhu's terrifying presence. However, it wasn't long before they felt a rumbling around them. What was that? The colorful fishes, which used to be so energetic, suddenly swam away in fear. The squids squirted out black ink before dashing away in a flash. Every single biofluorescent creature fled for their lives. Michael and Juniper turned around, and in the darkness, they could see the walls of Cthulhu's body trembling. Then, they saw an outline of a large snake creature with black and white scales. Its face bore a close resemblance to dragons, while its body was that of an eel. It had its jaws unclenched, ready to devour everything in its sight. It swam towards them, bumping into the fleshy walls of Cthulhu's body in a hurry. The Leviathan? Juniper exclaimed. It seemed that another colossal sea creature had manifested into Nixie's subconscious void. Unfortunately, unlike Cthulhu, this one looked alive enough to be hungry. We have to go, Juniper said, swimming as fast as she could away from the Leviathan. He quickly followed behind her. Thankfully, the flow of water worked in their direction, pushing them away from the Leviathan and neglecting the speed difference in water between them. However, this seemed to have worked for the Leviathan as well. It started gaining on them, inching closer and closer to their feet. With its jaws wide open, it was ready to devour them whole. There, Juniper said, seeing a small diversion to the side, just enough for them to pass through. Without thinking about it, they pushed their bodies to the right, fitting perfectly into the small hole just in time as Leviathan's jaws clenched shut towards them. The whole chamber trembled as Leviathan tried to enter the hole. It thrashed around, angry, but was not able to destroy the fleshy linings of Cthulhu's body. For now they were safe. That was close, he muttered. But just then, they suddenly felt the current start to pick up with more and more intensity, pushing them around into a circle. And at the center of this current was a whirlpool that seemed to go down straight into a dark abyss. "Swim against it," Juniper said, trying to get out of the whirlpool that trapped them. He swam with her, using all of his might to thrash the water around and free himself from the flow of the current. Eventually, they found themselves in the still part of the water. The whirlpool didn't have any flow of current here, making them safe. But just as they were about to get their bearings, the entire chamber shook once again as the Leviathan seemed to have finally broken through the flesh walls of Cthulhu's body. It roared, sending a shockwave throughout the water. Then it turned towards them, with its red eyes keen on finally catching its prey. "We're trapped," Juniper said as she looked forward and saw nothing but a dead end. They had nowhere else to go. They had been cornered by the Leviathan. "We have to go into the whirlpool," he said to her. He noticed that the whirlpool wasn't just a place where it drew water in. It was also the place where all the surge of ability power was coming from. They would no doubt find Nixie there on the other side. Juniper looked at Michael and nodded. Even though they'd only just met today, she was already trusting his decisions. He had already proven himself multiple times before. "Okay, but we have to go now," she said. They jumped back into the whirlpool at the same time, dodging the Leviathan's lunge. It collided into the wall, disorienting it for a brief second. And while Michael and Juniper rotated around the whirlpool, the Leviathan finally got its bearings. And without hesitation, it swam towards them and into the whirlpool. "Swim to the center," he said to Juniper. They both began swimming directly into the eye of the whirlpool, speeding up their descent into the hole. It wasn't long before they plunged into the dark abyss, with Michael dodging the Leviathan's sharp teeth by a hair width. It angrily thrashed around, angry that it couldn't capture its prey. This time it had finally given up. Meanwhile, Michael and Juniper both fell into the abyss, with the stream of water pushing them down like a waterfall. Eventually, they landed on the bottom of the abyss, where the waters were as calm and serene as could be. And right in front of them, they saw Nixie, sitting inside a giant clam shell. Chapter 658. Coming out of the shell. Little Nixie was sitting inside the clamshell, with what seemed like action figure toys of sea monsters surrounding her. She had a miniaturized version of Cthulhu in one hand, and the Leviathan in the other. She was playing with them, propping them up and making it seem as if they were interacting with each other. She was so focused on playing her game that she didn't even seem to notice their presence at all. "Nixie," Juniper called out as she carefully approached the little mermaid. But still, Nixie ignored her. She kept on playing with her toys. "We're here to help you. Why don't you come out with us and we can talk?" she said to Nixie. This time, Nixie finally reacted. She stopped playing with her toys but kept her gaze down. "I don't want to," she muttered. Juniper pursed her lips. I see now why her Tao heart deteriorated to this state. It's because she has chosen to live in her own subconscious and refused to experience the real world. Nixie's real life was bland. With the curse of her Tao heart, she was unable to do things that normal merman children would do. While everyone rode on manta rays for school, she remained at home, unable to even leave her coral bed. While everyone swam through the 7 seas for a trip, she remained at their home, with no friends to accompany her. The worst part was that even through all the sacrifices, she would still end up dying because of her curse. Compared to that, her subconscious was filled with excitement and adventure. She had Cthulhu and the Leviathan by her side, keeping her company and making sure that she was never lonely again. And in this place, she could move, swim, and fly as she liked without her heart hurting at every movement. She would rather spend her time here than live in the real world. However, by choosing to live in her subconscious, she was only further dooming her Tao heart into failure. Even now, when Juniper had fixed the strain of her Tao heart, Nixie was choosing to let it fail. After all, even if she survived today, it would only delay the inevitable. The curse would still linger in her Tao heart, destroying her body again and again and again. In her mind, there was no point in trying to fix what was unfixable. "Nixie, honey, you can't stay here forever. You have to wake up. Your parents are waiting for you," Juniper said, approaching her. "No!" Nixie screamed. Juniper took a step back, respecting her wishes. "She is adamant in staying, and that's bad for all of us," she said to Michael. "We have no choice but to force her out of this place. We have to get her out of Cthulhu's body." "Okay, how are we going to do that?" he asked her. "Taking her is easy. It's what comes after that's hard. Her whole subconscious will fight against us," she warned. "I have about 350% charge left on my batteries. That's good enough for one quantum slash and a quantum step. Thankfully, he absorbed a lot of AP from Nixie's awakening. If he hadn't, then he wouldn't be as confident doing this mission. "I'm ready," he said to her. Once again, Juniper counted with her fingers before lunging towards Nixie, grabbing her tightly. "Kya!" Nixie screamed, with the whole subconscious void trembling with her voice. But no matter how much Nixie tried to squirm out, Juniper had a firm grip on her waist. "Let's go," she said, jumping out and back into the hole they came from. Michael followed suit, swimming up and eventually emerging from the whirlpool's spout. Suddenly, the despondent Leviathan reared its head up, surprised at his prey's sudden reappearance. Juniper quickly swam through the waters, getting out of the raging currents before the Leviathan could get to them. With the monster hot on their trail, they eventually reached the hole they diverged into and squeezed past its cavity. The Leviathan charged head first into the hole, using its dragon-like spiky scales to pierce through the very lining of Cthulhu's body. And this time it seemed to have been able to burst through. It seemed that the disturbance in the subconscious void caused by Nixie's distress weakened the structure of Cthulhu's body enough for the Leviathan to break through. Not only that, but Michael and Juniper were now swimming back up Cthulhu's body, fighting against the current and slowing them down. Eventually, the Leviathan finally caught up to them. With its jaws open wide, it could swallow an entire city completely. Michael and Juniper were easy prey. "We're close to the exit." Juniper's words trailed off when she saw Michael slowing down his ascent. "What are you doing?" she asked him. She could see the Leviathan going straight for him. "You guys go ahead," he replied to her. "I'll slow it down." Juniper was speechless. The Leviathan would have most certainly caught up to the both of them. There was no doubt about it. So if Michael hadn't sacrificed himself and made himself bait, then Juniper wouldn't be able to take Nixie out of Cthulhu's body. However, this would almost certainly spell certain doom for Michael. He was facing a legendary monster of the ocean. Even if this was just a representation made by Nixie's subconscious, its strength still far exceeded Michael's strength. Heck, he wouldn't be able to fight against it even if he was a 9th stage magnetic. Michael didn't seem to care about any of this and came to a standstill as he waited for the Leviathan to come closer enough near him. Then, he took out his switch and manifested his Unity Saber. As the Leviathan closed its jaws to tear him in half, he activated his batteries, allowing him to gather enormous amounts of ability power in his wrists. Space began to warp around his hands as he grabbed the very fabric of reality in front of him and forcefully transported him into another location. Juniper saw Michael's body completely disappear from her sight, surprising her. It took a few moments for her to realize where he had gone off to. She looked up at the Leviathan's head and saw Michael in between its eyes, with his strange weapon in both hands. More and more ability power poured out of Michael's batteries, basically draining it of energy. With 300% charge in his hands, the reality-bending power extended up to his Unity Saber, allowing it to tear space apart and create an accretion effect around it. He swung his blade, letting a crescent of torn space to launch towards the Leviathan's head. His quantum slash collided against the Leviathan's head, quickly tearing the scales off its skin. The Leviathan recoiled in pain, receding back into the darkness. Juniper couldn't believe her eyes. Somehow, for those brief moments, Michael was able to exhibit a strength above his own stage, above his own realm. Those were techniques that only nascent spirit realm cultivators could achieve. Impossible. Who is he? Aerith already told her about his impossible feat of defeating Alaric and Potbowl. But it was only now did Juniper finally believe those words. Chapter 659. Exit Rift. Juniper couldn't help but stare at Michael in wonder. She wanted nothing more than to question him about his incredible and unexplainable strength. But she knew that this was not the time. Nixie was starting to feel drowsy again. She was no longer wrestling out of Juniper's grasp. This was all due to the fact that they forcefully pulled her out of her subconscious. This made her active and conscious self to awaken, causing her to become the same despondent person as she was in reality. Just then, the whole subconscious void started to tremble yet again. But this time, the magnitude was a lot stronger than before. They could feel their bodies starting to rip apart just from the shaking of the sea. "We have to get out of the subconscious void now," Juniper said. "She's starting to wake up. And if she does, we won't be able to get out." Thankfully, with the Leviathan out of the equation, Juniper and Michael could finally exit Cthulhu's body. They floated out of the dark abyss and saw the endless dark blue ocean in front of them. They continued to swim forwards until they felt movement behind them. They turned around, only to see Cthulhu's eyes moving around before settling in their direction. Its two giant wings started to flap, causing its entire body to move forward and catch up to Michael and Juniper in an instant. "Damn! Even Cthulhu's coming after us. I don't have any more AP in my battery. It's not going to attack you," Harbinger said. And before he could question him, Cthulhu suddenly opened its mouth and sent a shockwave that traveled towards them at the speed of sound. I mean no harm, Cthulhu said, with its voice low and with an echo. I want only to express my greatest thanks to you for saving her. Cthulhu's red eyes softened as it gazed at the unconscious Nixie. Juniper stopped in her tracks, unable to comprehend what she just heard. That's not possible. Her consciousness is supposed to take over now. With Nixie already well on her way to activating her conscious mind, everything in the subconscious void should start to become inactive as a result. However, this representation of Cthulhu seemed to have only gained movement right after Nixie got out of her subconscious. Not only that, but it gained the capacity to speak as well. That was impossible. Unless, it's not a representation. It's the real deal. Juniper could only gasp at the realization she had just made. This Cthulhu wasn't a figment of Nixie's imagination. It was actually Cthulhu itself, or at least, a part of its soul. That was the only way to explain it. Juniper couldn't believe that one of the most ancient, most powerful sea monsters in the entire world would lend a part of its soul to a mermaid child's subconscious void. Not only that, it seemed to care for her as if it was its child. Wait, does she have an extraordinary blessing? The power that she was awakening was one that could control or communicate with sea creatures. It all made sense. Back when the Leviathan was hunting them down, it wasn't because it wanted to eat them. It wanted to protect Nixie, and it tried to catch them because Nixie wanted to return to her shell. That was how brought Cthulhu itself into her subconscious void. What's an extraordinary blessing? Michael asked. It's the equivalent of having a SSS-class talent, she replied. It's one of the most extreme and fruitful awakenings that a beast folk can have. Juniper could only lament the fact that despite having such a wonderful blessing, Nixie was still being plagued with the curse. If her life wasn't limited by the weakness of her own Tao heart, she could become one of the most powerful mermaids in the entire world. But there was no time to think about that. They had to get out of the subconscious void. She looked around, eventually finding a glowing white rift in the water. That was their exit. She quickly turned around to inform Michael, but saw him just staring blankly at Cthulhu. You are different, Cthulhu muttered. The fact that such an ancient being like Cthulhu would even deign to talk to Michael only proved the fact that the boy was extraordinarily different from others. But then, she saw something she never thought would happen in her entire life. Cthulhu bowed its head at Michael. I treat your power with esteem, Cthulhu bellowed. And before Juniper could even react, the trembling of the subconscious void got more intense, with ocean water itself starting to break apart. It won't be long before they'd get crushed under the weight of this void and become forever lost in its space. Not only that, but the exit rift was slowly closing. Cthulhu's tentacles whipped forward, creating a large stream of water that pushed Juniper and Nixie into the glowing white rift. The only one left behind was Michael and Cthulhu. Kukuku. At least he knows his place, Harbinger said. He can sense you? Of course. I'm always stronger in a subconscious mind. He can feel it. Cthulhu gazed at him, its eyes seemingly peering down into the depths of his soul. Human, I request for you to save that child. She is of weak body but with a strong mind. She does not deserve a life cut short. He could sense emotion within Cthulhu that almost seemed human. You care for her? I do. Ever since she summoned a part of my consciousness in this void, I have kept her company and she has kept mine. We have bonded, and I now treat her as if she was my own brood. He wouldn't have expected to hear that from a creature like Cthulhu. After all, it was always depicted as the pinnacle of Lovecraftian horror, not as the sentimental and misunderstood being that it was now. I'll try my best to save her, he promised. That is acceptable, Cthulhu said. To express my gratitude, I leave you with this gift. Treasure it. Cthulhu's tentacles started to squirm. It converged into one point, with all of its ends starting to glow with a white light. Then suddenly, particles started to manifest in front of Cthulhu, forming to take the shape of a sphere. It wasn't long before an iridescent pearl formed in front of Cthulhu. With a simple nudge from its tentacles, the pearl moved towards Michael. And as it got closer to him, he finally realized the true size of his gift. The pearl was as big as he was. He touched the pearl and tried to move it, only to realize that it was extremely heavy. Even in the weightlessness of water, he found it extremely hard to push forwards. What is this? He asked Cthulhu. But instead of answering, Cthulhu shot a stream of water towards Michael, pushing him into the glowing white rift just before it closed completely. Michael landed on his feet, now back in the surgery room with everyone looking at him. What happened? Juniper asked him. I don't know, he said truthfully. He really didn't know why Cthulhu gave him a giant pearl. Still, he made sure to store it in his drone's pocket dimension for now so that it was out of sight, out of mind. Chapter 660. Shedding. Once they were out of the subconscious void, Juniper immediately went to continue her surgery on Nixie's heart. A couple of minutes later, she made the final stitches on the Dao heart, mending the cut that leaked out ability power everywhere. And finally, the room went silent. There was no chaos, no rampaging ability power, and no more distressed look on Nixie's face. She seemed to finally be sleeping peacefully for the first time in a few weeks. What happened out there? Reed asked, hugging his wife in anxiousness. Did you save her? Juniper nodded. Yes, we did. We have successfully pulled Nixie out of her subconscious void, allowing her Dao heart to recover normally. Reed and his wife felt their legs turn to jelly out of relief. It was as if a giant mountain was lifted off their shoulders. Thank you. Thank you. He grabbed Juniper's hands and kneeled in front of her. It's not just me you should thank. I couldn't have done it without him, Juniper said, pointing to Michael. She could still vividly remember the scene in which he clashed against the Leviathan, using a strength that was above his own realm. It was unreal. She was starting to wonder why Michael was still unknown in the greater part of Metropolis when he was already so talented that he could arguably put head-to-head against so-called geniuses. Thankfully, though, it seemed that someone finally appreciated Michael's talents. Reed went over to Michael and clasped his hands. You have made a friend in me, he said. I genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart. Michael awkwardly accepted the compliment even though he knew that Juniper did most of the work. All he did was support her a few times. Although the mood inside the room was hopeful, there was still a lingering sense of sadness in Juniper. The senior apothecary approached Nixie's parents and had a talk with them face to face. Listen, I will give it to you straight. We saved Nixie's life today. But that doesn't mean that she has been completely cured of her disease. Since we forcefully pulled her out of her subconscious void, Nixie will become even more lethargic than before. She'll refuse to do anything, eat, sleep, and move. Her road to recovery is incredibly steep, which means that you'll have to be with her every step of the way. You have to keep constantly trying to awaken her out of this near catatonic state or else her Dao heart will continue degrading, leading to another dangerous incident such as today. Reed and his wife held each other for emotional support. Even though they just passed through a difficult hurdle, more and more hurdles appeared on their way. Is there no way to save her? No way to let her live a normal life? Reed asked. Juniper wanted to say yes and keep their hopes up, but she knew that she'd be lying if she said it. Unless we can get rid of the curse in her Dao heart, then her situation will not get better. It will get worse, and there is nothing that we can do about it. Nixie's parents stifled a cry. Just then, Michael raised his hand and got everyone's attention. Nixie needs to stimulate her Dao heart to keep the curse at bay. Correct? Juniper nodded. Then wait for me for a few days. I think I can do something, he said. And before anyone could ask questions, he teleported out of the room and back into the nation of Reborn. He landed in the middle of the desert, with a large patch of the ground in front of him. They had already dug deep to build the roller coaster's foundations. He then saw Kong and the rest of the Rebornian Imagineers working hard to plan and conduct the construction project with the best quality and efficiency that they could afford. Kong, listen, have you guys settled on a design for the thrilling roller coaster as of yet? The group of yellow Hobmanki engineers shook their heads, embarrassed. I'm sorry, boss, but we can't settle on a design just yet. We know nothing about the Merman Society, so we don't know which design would give the best results. He looked at them with a smile. Well, I've got the solution for you. Here's my plan. He began telling them about his experience in the subconscious void, entering Cthulhu's mouth and being chased by the Leviathan with nothing but the darkest shadows around to accompany them. ChatJK5 even stepped in and gave them a first-person perspective view on Michael's memory, allowing them to feel, hear, and experience the thrilling moment that he entered into the mouth of the colossal ocean monster. About 10 minutes later, Kong and the engineers were lit afire with inspiration. It's the perfect way to create a thrilling ride that brings fear and excitement to mermen, Kong praised. We shall start out designs as you have said, boss. It had already been proven that mermen feared the monsters under the depths, including the most ancient of them all, Cthulhu. And if they started the roller coaster ride the same way their journey started, then the mermen would immediately feel intimidated by sheer instinctual fear they had of being consumed by Cthulhu. During the ride itself, they would be chased by the Leviathan nonstop, just like what happened to them in the void. And to do that, they needed to build the biggest structure they'd ever built, one that could be seen even far off from a distance. Of course, the inside should be expansive as well. It had to be immersive, one that would make its riders feel as if they were transported into the deepest depths of the ocean. And as for its animatronics, he couldn't simply use robots with painted costumes. He had to borrow from the real thing. He had to make them from real sea monsters. He immediately transported himself back into the fishing village, finding Quint back in his tackle shop. The old man seemed to be very happy seeing his face and immediately bragged to him about his exploits these past few days. You won't believe what happened to me, young fella. At the start, I had an incredibly hard time finding any suitable sea monsters to present to you. However, just a few hours ago, these perfectly preserved carcasses suddenly floated up from the depths of the ocean. Quint led Michael to the back of the shop, unveiling the large cover to reveal a snake-like creature curled up dead. His eyes widened as he realized that the sea creature looked very familiar. Its dragon-like face and its eel-like body reminded him of none other than the Leviathan back in the void. This is not the Leviathan, but its weaker, younger cousin. Still, they're from the same lineage, so you can still see the resemblance. Michael was incredibly pleased with this. This perfectly preserved carcass was the perfect size to use in the ride. And that's not all, look at this, Quint said, removing another large cover on the ground. He revealed what seemed to be a shed skin of a gigantic octopus limb. My first thought was that this was one of Cthulhu's tentacles. But that's impossible. So, this is probably just another sea creature in the depths that has giant limbs. Chapter 661. First Themed Ride. Michael eyed the tentacle shedding and realized that it looked exactly like it came from Cthulhu itself. Although this looked a little small, he knew firsthand that Cthulhu's tentacles were as thick and tall as skyscrapers, but its ends were incredibly thin and reached down to the thickness of a human person. And this looked exactly like the ends of Cthulhu's tentacles. There was no doubt about it. This shedding and that Leviathan carcass. Was this on purpose? It almost seemed as if Cthulhu knew exactly what he needed and gave it to him at the very same moment. Is he spying on me or something? No, I just told him to do that. You said you needed a preserved sea monster carcass. So who better to ask than the literal primordial beast of the sea? It seemed that Harbinger talked with Cthulhu without his knowledge. Well, it's good to have it, I guess. He accepted all of the carcasses Quint got him and offered to pay about 10 million gold coins for all of them. But despite such a high price point, Quint refused to take even a single gold coin. TSH, I don't need money. I'm just doing this for the love of the game. And this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I doubt I would ever get to catch such beautiful monsters ever again. He was reminded that Quint was the father of Reptar, who owned a very successful company in Metropolis. They definitely weren't poor, despite the shabbiness of his shop. He thanked Quint and went back to the nation of Reborn to continue his work. While the Rebornians were busy building the foundation for the entire roller coaster, he busied himself with creating the magical animatronics that would be the skeleton for the sea monster carcasses. He wanted to combine mechanics, magic, and nature to create a very realistic recreation of the Leviathan and Cthulhu as well. He used the techniques he learned from the magic tower, creating a layered magic spell that allowed him to bring earth, water, air, fire, and finally, light into the skeletal structure he was going to build. Downloading mastery of robotics into your brain. Thanks to ChatJK5, he was able to create a flexible yet rigid structure. The Leviathan animatronic would be able to close and open its jaws freely and with great force, creating a terrifying crunch that could shatter even the strongest armors. As for its body, he based its anatomy on the body of an eel. He used the way it contracted its muscles to swim across the ocean at incredibly fast speeds, with its fins controlling its movement to the right or left. Once the basic structure was done, he didn't forget to add the little details. That was what would truly make this animatronic believable. And thankfully, he had his own memory to rely on. He remembered how the small fins on its back waved in accordance to its movement, the way its scales flared up when angry, and the way that each bony structure in its face became the product of peak evolution that focused on hunting its prey. He molded all of that into the animatronic, eventually forming a monster that could swallow an entire school bus with ease. Once that was done, he began filling it in with the carcass he got from Quint. He laid out its skin, stretching it to fill the entirety of the animatronic. He spliced off some of its body parts and filled in the little details to make it as horrifying as possible. And in the end, with ChatJK5 helping him through every step of the way, he was able to recreate the Leviathan. There's just one last thing to check. He casted a spell, manipulating the Leviathan's skeletal structure to move in a certain way. Suddenly, the animatronic came to life, its red eyes blinking and its jaws opening to reveal its sharp fangs. It lunged at him, making him flash back to that memory in the void. If he didn't know any better, then he would have also been fooled by it. The best part about this was that because the Leviathan was made out of a magical skeleton, its movements were completely programmable. It could move in a completely different way in every single ride. It's done. Next, he needed to set the stage in which his Leviathan would rampage in. He began working on the roller coaster itself, becoming as hands-on as possible. And with his help, they were able to finish the entire thing in just under a day. He was able to create a closed aquarium that could house millions upon millions of tons of water. This ride was going to be one of those splash-heavy attractions since they would be plunging into the water at some point. He didn't need any testing for this because he was already confident in its outcome. After all, He based the entire trajectory of the ride on his experience in Nixie's subconscious void. He knew firsthand how terrifying it was. Kong and the other engineers were in charge of the decoration, creating bioluminescent corals, seaweeds, and other such designs to make the ride look as realistic as possible. Once that was done, there was just one last thing to tackle. This was perhaps the most important aspect of this roller coaster, as it would dictate everyone's perception of the ride. It was the recreation of Cthulhu. It would be the very face of the ride. Of course, he couldn't make it life-sized, so he had to size it down a little bit. But still, everyone would have to look up to see the statue in its entirety. He used the magical skeleton to create its face, its giant squirming tentacles, and even its fully functioning wings on its back. And for the final finishing touches, he added Cthulhu's Rayal-shedding skin to cover the entire structure. As soon as he laid the final patch, he felt a minute, almost imperceptible shockwave coming from the statue. Everyone working on the roller coaster froze and looked up at Cthulhu with fear in their eyes. Even though they'd been working on this the entire time, they now doubted whether it was really just a statue or not. Even Michael felt as if he was in the presence of Cthulhu itself. Adding a real part of Cthulhu in this animatronic really pushed it to the next level. After seeing the finished result, he could only pat himself on the back for a job well done. Working 3 days without sleep was well worth it. The ride looked absolutely magnificent. It was miles better than his first roller coaster, and it was even better than the themed rides he saw in his previous world. It still needed a little bit of testing, but he could safely say that it was done. All he needed to do now was give it a proper name. Into Cthulhu's Void, he muttered. This would be the first ride that would be implemented in his planned theme park. But this ride's importance wasn't just because of that. It was because he specifically created this with Nixie in mind. This could mend her broken Tao heart. Chapter 662. Into Cthulhu's Void. He teleported himself back into Aerith's estate, where Nixie was currently staying in to receive full-time support. He arrived just in time as Juniper and the others were doing their daily checkup of the Little Mermaid. While Aerith and Theodora administered medicine to Nixie through skin, Juniper addressed Nixie directly. "Are you awake now, Nixie?" Juniper asked, moving her hand across Nixie's face. Nixie's eyes adjusted at the change in light, showing that she was fully conscious at this moment. However, she barely reacted. As we expected, she has returned to her near catatonic state. But it's good that she's not in a critical condition. Her Tao heart is at least stable. Juniper wrote in her scroll, documenting Nixie's progress throughout these past few days. As part of her healing journey, they prescribed a lot of medicine to try and help Nixie heal her Tao heart. Some were meant for healing her wounds in the heart, and some were experimental, aiming to stimulate her Tao heart through artificial means. They also tried physical therapy, allowing her to walk and swim by herself for at least a few seconds every day. None of these methods succeeded, but they still tried nonetheless. They had to get her healthy some way or another. "Michael, you're back," Juniper greeted. "I am. And I'm here to tell you that I may have found a solution to Nixie's problem." Reed immediately snapped awake from his nap. "Solution? You can cure Nixie?" Michael raised his hand and tried to calm down the man. "I'm not 100% certain, but I think that I can help her in some way." "Have you found some medicine for her Tao heart?" Juniper asked, a little bit expectant. She had already seen him create anesthesia out of nowhere, so she just assumed that he had somehow created a panacea. She wouldn't even be surprised at that point. "No," he told her. "It's more like an experience. I think it'll be better if I just show you. Do you guys mind if we teleport there?" Everyone looked at each other, and before they could say something, a dark shadow enveloped the whole room. A couple of seconds later, the shadows subsided and everyone realized that they were in a completely different environment. All around them was an endless desert, a complete and total opposite to the cityscape of Metropolis. "Where are we?" Theodora asked. "We're at my place, the nation of Reborn," he replied, gesturing to the city in the distance with buildings each as tall as the magic towers. "In the parched lands?" Aerith gasped. They somehow transported from Metropolis all the way over to the southern edge of the royal continent itself in just a few seconds. And it wasn't just him. It was all of them. Michael transported them all thousands of kilometers away in just a few seconds. Not only that, but when she looked over to the nation of Reborn, she was gobsmacked at the sheer magnitude and size of the territory. It looked even bigger than Metropolis. She couldn't understand how that could happen when they were living in the middle of the desert. And as for Theodora and Juniper, who knew nothing about the Daily Metro's article of Michael, they were doubly surprised at the revelation. "So young, yet you were able to establish such a large territory for yourself," Juniper muttered in amazement. Every time she learned something new about Michael, she kept getting surprised. "I'll give you all a tour of the nation later, but for now, I want you all to direct your attention at the building behind you." Everyone turned around and saw the colossal statue of Cthulhu. Reed and his wife could only stand there in pure shock as they stared upon one of the most feared primordial sea monsters in the world. Their innate instincts as mermen flared up, making them seize up. And unbeknownst to everyone, Nixie's head moved up just slightest bit, seemingly intrigued at seeing a familiar friend. That's Cthulhu, Juniper gasped. Her memory of the void was still so fresh in her mind, and seeing Cthulhu right in the flesh immediately made her remember. That's right, I modeled it after him. Let's go closer, he told them. They began walking towards Cthulhu, with an invisible sensation of dread becoming ever more stronger. Reed had to remind himself that this was not real. Just then, they heard the clanking of metal accompanied by a mix of screams. Some were excited, while most were exhibiting their primal fear. Everyone looked at the bottom of the statue and saw mermen boarding onto the ride and getting strapped to their seats. They were the ones who were screaming. Kya! Michael asked Serena, Morana, and the rest of their merman attendants to be the first riders of Into Cthulhu's Void, and they happily obliged. Though after being strapped into their seats, some of them looked like they were regretting their choices. The roller coaster ride then started its ascent, with the railings spiraling up Cthulhu's entire body before eventually ending up at its mouth. The tentacles around Cthulhu's mouth squirmed before it opened its jaws and welcomed its first riders. Reed and his wife held each other in fear, thinking that Serena and the others were devoured by this Cthulhu statue. Then, a few moments later, they heard their screams echo out from Cthulhu's mouth yet again. This continued on for about 2 minutes before the ride exited out of the mouth and returned back to the ground. Reed immediately ran towards Serena and the others, seeing them completely drenched. Are you guys all right? He asked them. Moirana, the old mermaid, had her head down rested on the armbar. In all the years of my life, I have never felt so alive. Huh. Serena turned towards Moirana. That was awesome, right? I want to go again. The other mermen had a similar reaction. Yeah, mistress. That was exciting and terrifying at the same time. I feel my heart racing. Oh, did you see the Leviathan? I thought it would have gotten us each time. Ha ha ha. You should have seen the look on your face. You're one to talk. Reed was completely confused to see their reactions. They screamed throughout the entire duration of the ride. Yet now, they were acting as if it was the greatest thing that they had ever experienced in their lives. What is this? He asked them. Serena turned towards him. This is called a roller coaster, and it is one of Michael's greatest inventions yet. You should try it as well, Sir Reed. Michael and the others finally caught up to Reed. And just like him, Juniper and the others couldn't understand the dichotomy in their reactions. They were scared out of their wits, yet they wanted to go again. You guys should try it, he told them. It might look like it's dangerous, but everything is completely safe. Of course, the first-timers were a bit apprehensive. They had never seen this kind of thing before. The sheer scale of Into Cthulhu's Void was inconceivable in their minds, making the dread of riding even worse. I can't, Reed said. I am deeply afraid of Cthulhu. We'll just. And just as he turned around to look at his daughter, he was surprised to see that she was looking up at the ride intentionally. Chapter 663, Fear-Worth. Nixie had never looked up at anything. Ever. She always had that absent-minded look that seemed to stare out into nothingness. Yet now, Reed could see a hint of clarity in her eyes as she gazed upon the gigantic statue of Cthulhu. Nixie. My daughter. She's. Welling up with emotions, Reed couldn't quite bring out the words to describe his joy upon seeing a hint of his daughter coming back to normal. She's reacting to the Cthulhu, Juniper muttered. It makes sense. This entire thing looks like it was ripped straight out from her subconscious void. For the first time in her life, she is feeling as if she belongs in the real world. Juniper looked at Michael, surprised at his ingenuity. Just like he said, he found a way to help stimulate Nixie's heart. He brought her subconsciousness into reality, tempting her to finally face the world. This can help her, she said. Close proximity with the Cthulhu will allow her to slowly warm up to the world. There's a better way to do that, Michael interjected. We can have her ride the roller coaster. His suggestion seemed insane at first, given how scary the ride seemed to look. Then Juniper realized something. This may be the way to help Nixie strengthen her Tao heart without exerting her body. She could experience great emotions without having to physically strain herself. That was one of the problems of her Tao heart. They couldn't strengthen it because she was far too weak to stimulate it through normal means like fighting or sparring. But now, this roller coaster offered Nixie a way to solve that, circumventing the physicality of it all entirely. Reed approached his daughter. Nixie, do you want to ride the roller coaster? He asked her. Nixie turned towards him and gave a subtle nod. Reed and his wife stifled their gasp. They had never seen Nixie respond to them before. In just a few seconds of being close to the roller coaster, Nixie had progressed far more than what they achieved through years and years of effort. "We'll go. I'll accompany my daughter," Reed said, gulping down his fears. He then picked up his daughter and placed her on the roller coaster before taking the seat right next to hers. Behind them were Juniper and the others, who wanted to try out this roller coaster to see what was so special about it. Michael personally locked their seatbelts, adjusting Nixie's seat to accommodate her small stature. Once that was done, he gestured to the operator on the back, and the ride soon went off. And even though they were just spiraling up through Cthulhu's body, Reed was already grabbing onto the steel railings as if his life depended on it. In comparison, Nixie just sat in her seat with no expression, except with the tiniest bit of a smile forming at the edges of her mouth. The roller coaster ride creaked clink, 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 as they reached the apex of their height. They were now face to face with Cthulhu's mouth, with its tentacle tendrils moving erratically. "You dare enter into the void? Be very well prepared." Everyone jolted in their seats, not expecting to hear Cthulhu's statue speak as if it was a real living being. Juniper was the most surprised, as she realized that it sounded exactly the same as the Cthulhu they met in the subconscious void. How did he replicate it with such accuracy? She asked herself. However, this was not the time to think. Their ride entered Cthulhu's mouth, with mist spraying around them. Just then, their ride seemingly dropped out of the railings and into the water, creating a splash. This surprised them as they couldn't see anything inside Cthulhu's mouth. It was pure darkness, adding only to the dread of what's to come. They continued to float in the water, which seemed to be slowly picking up in speed as they continued onwards. Then, they heard the sound of water rustling like a river. Its intensity gave them a hint about its speed, making them realize that this wasn't a gentle stream, but a waterfall instead. Everyone held onto their seats as their ride plunged into the darkness. They screamed out their lungs at this unexpected descent. It wasn't long before they crashed into the water, submerging them for a few seconds before their ride floated back up. "That's ocean water," Reed realized. That water came straight from the sea. Then, they saw lights emerge around them. Everywhere they looked, they saw an entire ecosystem of marine animals living in the deepest depths of the ocean. They saw bioluminescent fishes glowing with prismatic colors. There were corals pulsating with lights. This made Reed feel like he was back home. He looked to his side and saw Nixie's eyes wander around the room. The cloudiness in her gaze was starting to fade, becoming replaced by an iridescent green. "Whoa! Amazing!" Juniper and the others had never experienced such a sight. They were seeing what a merman would see in Atlantis. Just then, the entire ocean started to shake. They felt their ride start to sway side to side, with the possibility of it tipping over becoming ever so clear. While everyone was wondering about what was happening, Nixie looked forward and pointed at the darkness in front of them. Reed followed her hand and eventually saw two red lights surrounded by blackness. And as they got closer, they eventually saw the outlines of black and white scales around those two red lights. That's. The Leviathan emerged from the darkness, occupying the entire tunnel. It opened its jaws, with the gills on its side flaring up to increase its size even more. "Ah!" Reed screamed, utterly terrified. The fact that he had absolutely no control over the ride made him feel like he was being served up on a platter for the Leviathan to eat. Finally, the Leviathan lunged at their ride. But thankfully, the ride somehow stopped in place just a meter away from the Leviathan's terrifying jaws. Angry at its failed attempt, the Leviathan opened its jaws again and pounced on them again. This time, their ride reversed backwards as it tried to escape from the monster. The Leviathan chased after them, using its jaws to chomp down at Reed and Nixie, the two closest to the monster. Still, their ride was able to just barely escape out of the Leviathan's jaws each time. However, that didn't seem to have mattered as Reed felt like his soul was going to emerge out of his body due to pure horror. He was starting to regret going into the ride in the first place. Hi. Reed turned towards Nixie and saw her with a full smile. She was grinning each time that the Leviathan tried to chomp at them. "Nixie," he said, starting to smile. Seeing her like this made all the fear and horror become worth it. However, as if testing his words, the ride suddenly came to a stop as they hit the very back wall. They had nowhere else to go. Yet, the Leviathan was still in front of them, with its jaws opening with triumph. It lunged at them, making Reed almost pass out due to pure shock. Chapter 664, Road to Recovery. The ride continued on, with Reed basically having half of his eyes closed and clinging onto his seatbelt as if his life depended on it. He missed a lot of the features, including the whirlpool that took them to the very bottom of the floor and even the last fight scene with the Leviathan before they reached the exit. He only opened his eyes when he saw that they exited out of Cthulhu's mouth, with the bright rays of the sun finally illuminating them once again. Reed never thought that he would welcome the sight of the surface world compared to water, but this ride made him become aquaphobic. Well done, heroes. You have saved the pearl in the shell. My thanks is forever yours. Cthulhu's voice echoed out, thanking them for the ride before they descended down the rails and returned to the base. Once they came to a stop and the seatbelts came loose, Reed immediately jumped out of the ride and plopped onto the ground, short of breath and his face as pale as snow. Ha! Ha! Juniper and the others slowly walked out of their seats as well, still reeling from this unique experience. They felt as if they had just come from a grand adventure deep in the oceans, encountering the beauty of the deep sea, as well as the monsters that lurked within. The dark atmosphere, the eerie sounds of the deep ocean, the salty cold water, and even the Leviathan. Everything came together to create this unbelievable experience that couldn't be explained to anyone without them having to experience it themselves. They could hardly believe that someone was able to think of this concept, much less make it. Juniper, in particular, could only look up at the grandiosity of the whole ride. Surprisingly enough, she enjoyed every single bit of that ride. And it looks like she wasn't the only one. She looked at Nixie, who stayed in her seat, ready for another round. Again, Nixie muttered in excitement. There was pure joy and glee in the child's face. Juniper could hardly believe that she was looking at the same mermaid child that was on the brink of death. Now, Nixie just looked like any other child excited to play a game. She moved towards Nixie, grabbing her wrist and checking her pulse. Ba-dump, ba-dump. Her heart rate was healthy, healthier than it had ever been her entire life. It was beating loudly enough for Juniper to even hear it. Amazing, she muttered. This roller coaster has strengthened her Tao heart. She took a step back, unable to properly express the magnitude of this accomplishment. This had never happened before. There were some beast folks who miraculously recovered from their curse, but that was because they were able to survive a rigorous training regimen meant specifically to strengthen their Tao heart. Even then, Juniper heard that the success rate of that whole process was less than 1%. Sinclair considered it dangerous, and made a vow to not condone such actions. Of course, people still did it through pure desperation. But now, Michael seemed to have found a safe way to properly strengthen a Tao heart. All those afflicted with the curse no longer had to gamble their lives to cure their disease. Oh, my sweet daughter! Nixie's mother dashed to hug Nixie, amazed at her total transformation. She was so focused on her daughter that she didn't even notice that her husband was throwing up on a trash can due to ride sickness. Eventually, Reed recovered enough and returned to his family's side. Miss Juniper. This is a miracle, he rejoiced. It is, Juniper replied. If she continues to strengthen her Tao heart at this rate, then she'd completely get rid of the curse in a year. Reed and his wife immediately beamed up at such good news. All the verdicts they'd heard throughout this whole affair were pessimistic estimates of their daughter's lifespan. But now, for the first time ever, someone was giving them a time estimate to her full recovery. Dad, Mom, again, she said, looking at them with anticipation. Okay, Reed replied. He was going to camp on this roller coaster for an entire year if he had to. He then turned towards Michael, giving him a big hug. Thank you. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. I am ready to give my life to you in exchange for letting my daughter recover in this roller coaster. Michael scratched his head awkwardly. It's nothing, he replied. I'm just happy that I can help Nixie. You did more than just that, Reed insisted. You saved her life. You saved mine. You saved my family's. I'll give you all of my life in return. Basically, Michael was being offered to get Reed's entire wealth and his belongings just because of their gratitude towards him for curing their daughter. That was a lot of sand dollars. He'd practically be rich in terms of sue drops. However, he just wouldn't feel right taking advantage of vulnerable parents like Reed. Instead of paying me back, I have a little favor that I want you to fulfill, he said to Reed. I want you to spread the word about the roller coaster. I want more mermen to know that this is the place where they can have their Tao hearts stimulated without the drawbacks. Reed wasn't just a wealthy merman. He was also influential and well-known amongst the merman community. Just one word from him would be enough to get their attention. If this roller coaster got his seal of approval, then many mermen would believe the roller coaster's properties almost immediately. This was his true goal. He didn't just want to earn Reed's sand dollars. He wanted every merman to cycle their money through him. He might have rejected a lot of sand dollars right now, but that would be nothing compared to the potential income he would get if thousands upon thousands of mermen would visit his theme park every day. There was once a famous saying back in his old world. Give a man a fish and he will live for a day. But teach a man to fish and he will live for a lifetime. Michael wanted to learn how to fish. He wanted to attract as much mermen into the nation of Reborn as possible. That was the only thing he was going to get a steady stream of sand dollars coming his way. And as a businessman himself, Reed seemed to understand Michael's intentions very clearly. You have a bright future ahead of you, praised Reed. I shall do as you say and invite as many mermen into this place as possible. However, that really isn't a favor to you. It's more of a favor to me and my fellow mermen. There are going to be a lot of other people cursed with a weak Tao heart that could be saved with this roller coaster. It is my duty to lead them here and have them gain hope just as I have. So aside from that, I shall also give you 100,000 sand dollars now, and 10,000 more every month as compensation to let me and my family stay in your nation as we go through Nixie's recovery. Chapter 665. Sand dollars acquired. Chapter 665. Sand dollars acquired. Aerith and Theodora couldn't believe what they just heard. He was going to give Michael 100,000 sand dollars now and 10,000 more every month. All the other companies in Metropolis, both major and minor, would be extremely satisfied to earn 1,000 sand dollars in a single month from this upcoming parade. But now, Michael would be able to get a guaranteed 12 drops of sue in a year just from that alone. Meanwhile, Reed reached down into his pockets, revealing a small pouch and handing it over to Michael. Michael opened it and saw a mini pocket dimension inside, storing a mountain of these circular green objects with the texture of corals. He picked one up, observing it closely. So this is a sand dollar, he said, intrigued at the currency that the merman came up with. The sand dollar was about as small as a normal coin and had a trident stamped on its front. Not only that, but it looked like these sand dollars were alive. The tiny bumps on its surface were wriggling, as if it was a coral trying to capture its prey. The sand dollar is a creation of the Ocean King. We value this currency because we feel much closer with him when it is by our sides, making us feel secure. That's true. With 110,000 sand dollars in my hands, I do feel secure. Thank you. I really appreciate this, he said to Reed while pocketing the pouch. It's the least I could do. In fact, I have a piece of advice for you that you should follow. I think you should charge 1 sand dollar for every ticket in this roller coaster, advised Reed. Really? Michael was thinking of selling a one-day pass through the roller coaster for 1 sand dollar. He thought that was a fair way to price this theme park, given that it was just one attraction for now. Yes, many mermen are willing to spend 1 measly sand dollar to experience this roller coaster at least once in their lives. Reed knew exactly what the other mermen would think once they experienced this roller coaster. He knew the potential of this business. If Michael sold an all-you-can-ride one-day ticket pass for the roller coasters, then the lines for it would be unbearably long. Meanwhile, Aerith couldn't help but cover her entire mouth as she began to calculate the potential earnings Michael could have with this roller coaster. It's mind-blowing. If he's able to get a lot of mermen as his customers, then it'll just keep growing and growing, and she couldn't really be jealous of all this either. After all, she knew that she would never be able to do what Michael had done. Theodora couldn't help but be amazed as well. She had treated Michael as this inferior because he was young. She was thoroughly disproved. It's truly extraordinary what he was able to do, Juniper praised. I do not think that there's anything that can top his potential. It was at that moment that they suddenly heard a loud beeping from the gates. Juniper and the others watched as 4 large automobiles parked near the entrance. What is that? Juniper and Theodora asked simultaneously. Aerith, on the other hand, recognized it immediately. That's the automobile. Yep. It's getting late now and I think that you should all stay the night in the nation of Reborn. They all looked towards the nation of Reborn, with the sun already setting near the horizon. Then, the final burst of orange light flashed from the sun, before completely disappearing on the other side of the world. As night fell, the lights in the nation of Reborn littered the skies. This little piece of land in the desolate parched lands was even brighter and more magical than the starry night above the skies. I stand corrected, Juniper said, stifling her shock. This was the first time any of them had ever witnessed the power of electricity. While everyone was staring in wonder at the lights of the nation of Reborn, Michael felt a tug on his shirt. He turned around, only to see Nixie looking up at him. What is it, Nixie? You want to ride in the roller coaster again? Cthulhu, there. She pointed at Cthulhu's head, which had just swallowed a new batch of merman riders. I used the shedding skin of Cthulhu to make it look realistic, he explained to her. Cthulhu? It talked. Oh yeah. We made a pre-recorded voice to play throughout the ride. Nixie shook her head, refusing his explanation. Real presence. Because of her words, he looked back up at Cthulhu. But still, he saw no signs of life from the giant statue. What's she talking about? Kukuku. That old bastard. He's bored. He put a little bit of his consciousness into his shed skin so that he could see through the eyes of the statue. Nixie was right. He's really taken a liking to you. It's not every day that a primordial sea monster would bless an object from the surface world. It was probably because of Cthulhu's real presence that the ride looked extremely realistic. And for that, he was thankful. Nixie then looked up at him. Thanks, big bro. She then turned around and walked back to her parents. That little interaction warmed Michael's heart. She couldn't even walk or talk just a few hours ago. He really was making a difference in the world. Once the night fell, Michael had the Rebornians escort the guests to the nation of Reborn via automobiles. Aerith, Theodora, and Juniper were even more surprised with the car ride than the roller coaster. For the two unfamiliar with automobiles, they were shocked to learn that it didn't use any magic for it to travel so fast. As for Aerith, she was gobsmacked to learn that practically every Rebornian owned an automobile to ride. This was a completely new environment that they weren't used to. They felt like they were in an alien world. Skyscrapers, electric lights, and the overall unfamiliar technology around them made them feel out of place. Michael led them to their own guest houses. There, they began discovering the conveniences that every Rebornian was used to in this territory. Air conditioning, plumbing, heating, lights. These were all things that would have made life so much easier back in their own homes. Reed and the other mermen, in particular, loved how water was so easy to access with just a turn of a lever. Just from that alone, they knew that they didn't want to stay anywhere else in the surface world. They'd be happy just living in the nation of Reborn throughout the remainder of their visit. Meanwhile, Juniper was just taking this all in as she was starting to realize that Michael was destined for greatness beyond Metropolis and even beyond the royal continent. The nation of Reborn was the single best city she'd ever been in. And from what she'd heard, they'd only built this a few years ago. Their progression was absurd. And it was all thanks to one man, Michael. Michael Vanderbilt. She finally knew his last name after seeing his face plastered over everything in this nation. So the genes of the Great Lion have been passed down after all, she muttered. Chapter 666. Summer Vacation. Vanderbilt's feats were legendary. Too legendary, in fact, that many people were quite disappointed that none of his descendants could quite live up to his name despite his many offsprings. Of course, there were some notable figures within their family, but none had that same killer instinct as their patriarch. But now, Juniper was seeing something within Michael that the rest of the royal continent and the world had yet to see. He had it all. He had the strengths with a power far-reaching than his own cultivation level. If he was already this strong while he was still a fourth stage, then she could only imagine what he'd become in the other realms. He had the brains, allowing him to build all of the innovations that the nation of Reborn had to offer. Not only that, but he seemed to have something that not even his grandfather was able to accomplish. He had tremendous allies. He was starting to build an empire, one that even drew the elusive fairies out of their hiding. And now, she could see him have a relationship with the mermen as well, attracting them with a roller coaster that solved the curse plaguing their hearts. Even Eyes wasn't able to do that. I don't know how Sinclair's going to react once she finds out that the one who figured out how to create a numbing liquid for surgery would be a Vanderbilt, of all people. She laughed at all the times Sinclair expressed her frustrations to her about how Eyes didn't even know to tie a gauze. Meanwhile, as the others made themselves comfortable in the nation of Reborn, Michael suddenly felt a tug on his shadow. Upon closer inspection, he realized that someone was contacting him from the royal mansion in Metropolis. He already knew who it was. He transported himself into the shadow, becoming face to face with the Duchess herself. "Hey, Duchess! What's up? What's up?" the Duchess asked, calmly sipping her tea and not making eye contact with him. She seemed grouchy. Is something wrong?" he asked her again. "TSH, is something wrong?" he asks me. "I can't believe the gall. Yes, there's something wrong. I can't believe that you didn't invite me to your little trip back to your nation." She slammed her tea on the table, causing most of it to splash outside. This was the first time he'd seen her get so worked up. "Oh, how'd you know about that?" "Of course I'd know about it. Reed and the Mermans are high-profile people that I am keeping an eye on at all times. Their disappearance certainly reached my ears. Not only that, but many people reported having difficulty using their magic near the scene of the crime. You must have used your large-scale teleportation spell again." The Duchess pieced the clues together like a detective. He was impressed. "How'd you know it was me?" The Duchess reached down into the table and picked up a violet slime, who seemed to be quite content sitting on her lap. "Fudge told me," she said. "Master, Regina's been wanting to enter the nation of Reborn for a while now. Can't we let her?" "Regina? They're on a first-name basis now?" He didn't know if he was okay with Fudge being friends with the Duchess. The slime was already quite mischievous all on his own without having support from the single most influential person in all of Metropolis. He could only shudder at the thought of Fudge being in the ears of the Duchess, giving her misguided advice. "Fine, Duchess. I invite you to the nation of Reborn." The Duchess beamed. He said yes, everyone. Immediately, Prince Harry and Princess Elizabeth came into the room, with spouses and their children right next to them. They all wore summer attire, as if they were getting ready for a day at the beach. "I can't wait. I heard the sun in the parched lands is good for tanning my skin," Elizabeth said. That's a good idea, sis. We'll tan while the children play in the waters, Harry replied. Meanwhile, the small children chanted, swimming, swimming, swimming. Michael slapped his head. I think they're mistaking a desert for a beach. He couldn't even correct them because they were too busy being excited. 001, 002. You guys are in charge while we're gone. Okay? We'll be gone in 1-2 weeks tops, the Duchess bellowed. Then, she turned to Michael and waited for him to use his shadow spell. Having no choice in the matter, Michael transported the whole royal family into the nation of Reborn. Whoa, there's a lot of automobiles. The buildings are so tall, and they have stars in them. Everything here is so cool. While the kids were admiring the new scenery, the Duchess, Harry, and Elizabeth were stunned into silence. They never expected to see such a stark difference between Metropolis and the nation of Reborn. It was like night and day. Metropolis was a capital city, meaning that it was one of the biggest and most advanced territories in all of the royal continent. Yet, it looked like nothing compared to this. Unbelievable. The structure, the quality, the organization. Everything here is top-notch, the Duchess praised. She knew just how hard it was to create an organized rule in a territory. Yet, Michael was able to have a cohesive identity for all the Rebornians through the architecture, the design, and even the culture. Automobiles were driving in neat lines. Pedestrians would cross only when the lights turned green. And most impressive of all was that there was no trash or garbage anywhere in the streets. All were neatly stacked on garbage cans with 3 different categories for recycling. This is a utopia, Prince Harry said. I want to explore every inch of this place, Princess Elizabeth muttered. But just as they were about to embark on a tour of the nation, the kids' attention was suddenly pulled towards a scream from the distance. They turned towards the giant Cthulhu statue on the horizon. What's that? That's cool. Look, there's people on it. I want to go there. Finally, the Duchess noticed the primordial beast of the sea. And suffice it to say, she was shocked. Cthulhu? It's one of my newest attractions, Michael explained. It's a roller coaster-themed ride called Into Cthulhu's Void. You guys should check it out. With another teleportation spell, they all arrived on the foot of Cthulhu, with a ride having just started. Mermen, Prince Harry noticed. Those are mermen. He explained to them an abridged version of the events that passed just recently. So yeah, the mermen now visit this roller coaster at least once a day, he said. The Duchess shook her head. Michael glossed over one specific detail that shouldn't be played down. Wait. That needs more explanation. You solved the curse of the Tao Heart. Michael shrugged. I guess so. While the adults were busy being shocked by Michael's story, the fearless little royal kids immediately jumped into the queue for the ride. The mermen even graciously let them skip the line. Cool. We'll go up that monster's mouth. I'm excited. Just then, one little mermaid girl took a seat right next to the royal kids. They turned towards her. Hey, you're excited too. Like me. Nixie looked at the human children and gave them the tiniest bit of a smile. Excited, she replied. Chapter 667, Kilos. While the kids were having fun, the Duchess finally learned about Michael's arrangement with Reed and the other mermen. So each ticket is $1 $. How many tickets do you sell a day? She asked him. Normally, about 50 tickets, 100 if it's a good day, he replied. On the surface, that didn't really seem all that impressive. Of course, with 100 tickets a day, he would earn about $1,500 to $3,000 in a single month. But the Duchess was smart enough to look past the numbers. Instead, she looked deeper at the context of the situation. As far as she knew, there were only about 50 mermen who had visited Metropolis. And that came from 2 groups, Serena's and Reed's. All 50 of those mermen were now in the nation of Reborn. It wasn't hard to guess that the 50 tickets Michael was selling were from all those mermen residing in this nation. This meant that this roller coaster had close to 100% retention rate. All mermen who would visit this ride would choose to ride it again. This would mean that as more and more mermen learned about this roller coaster, then Michael's income of sand dollars would continue to grow tremendously. The Duchess couldn't believe it. And Reed has promised to give you 10,000 sand dollars per month aside from the 100,000 he already gave you, the Duchess asked. Yup, Michael replied. She then looked at him with all seriousness. You do know what you should do with all of that money, right? With the 100,000 sand dollars he currently had now, he could purchase 10 more sous drops without a problem. Serena already told him that he could purchase those drops from her any time that he wanted. I could practically upgrade all the options for my drone. Are you thinking about buying sous drops for it? Yeah. The Duchess shook her head. After the auction, you already have 10 drops of sous for your mithril artifact, correct? That means you won't need new drops of sous until a couple of years later. She was assuming that Michael would only reach the upper stages of the body formation realm 2 to 5 years later, which was already considered quite fast compared to normal. And assuming that he'd coat his mithril artifact with Sue with every advancement, then he'd only ever need more till he's in the latter stages. From her perspective, he truly didn't need to buy Sue anymore. Of course, she didn't know that he could purchase upgrades with each drop of Sue, but Michael wasn't going to tell her that. What I'm proposing to you is that you spend those sand dollars on another aspect for your company. Your officers. You're going to need more magnetics sooner rather than later. As you've seen the auction, it is incredibly important for companies to have multiple magnetics in their employ. What I'm suggesting is that you spend those sand dollars to buy Godforge pieces from companies. Michael was already thinking about getting Godforge pieces for the Dragonborns, but he never really found out how to properly procure them with normal means. After all, he had only ever really stolen his pieces from other people. But now, the Duchess was telling him that he could buy Godforge pieces in exchange for sand dollars. Is that possible? Usually, companies hoard their Godforge pieces and become overprotective over it like their life depends on it. But this time, you have a unique opportunity. The current demand for Sue drops is at an all-time high. And the only way to obtain those is through sand dollars, which means that whoever holds the most of those would be able to buy practically anything they want. Every company would jump at the chance to sell their Godforge pieces in exchange for Sue drops. After all, they could always get Godforge pieces in the future. But they never know when Serena's discounted selling price will last forever. Right now, Michael has the most sand dollars in all of Metropolis, a whopping 100,000. If he could buy Godforge pieces to turn the Dragonborns into magnetics, then that would definitely be a better use for his sand dollars rather than spending it on Sue drops. How much is the price conversion for that? He asked her, intrigued. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 Sue drop for 1 kilo of Godforge piece. Michael went silent for a moment before asking a question. What does 1 kilo of Godforge piece mean? The Duchess chuckled for a moment, thinking that he was joking. But after seeing the seriousness in his face, her jaw dropped. You really don't know? How did you get this far without knowing the most basic thing about diva cultivation? She thought he would have known about that by now since he was already in the 4th stage of body formation. Did your surgeon not tell you how many kilos of Godforge pieces they're putting in your heart? Oh, I didn't do that, he said, shrugging. I'm a natural magnetic, so I don't need to have surgery to get the Godforge pieces in my heart. They just come naturally. This time, the Duchess was the one who went silent. Sigh. I already guessed as much, but hearing you confirm it is still giving me whiplash. Anyway, let me give you a lesson on diva cultivation. In order to advance to the 1st stage of body formation, then you will need 1 kilo of Godforge pieces. And for the 2nd stage, you will need 2 kilos of Godforge pieces. And for the 3rd, you'll need 3 kilos. So on and so forth until the 9th stage. Michael didn't think that the Godforge requirement for each stage advancement would be so high. This meant that a magnetic would need a total of 45 kilos of Godforge pieces on their hearts to go from the 1st stage all the way up to the 9th stage. With my 10,000 sand dollars a month, then I could have enough to turn someone into a 9th stage magnetic in about 3.75 years. That's pretty long. The Duchess was stunned. Long? If any of the major factions heard that, then they'd be steaming with envy. In about 20 years, you can create 5 9th stage magnetics. That would be enough to contend even with the greatest companies in the royal continent, bar the conglomerates. And if you want to go for numbers, then you can spread that out and create multiple mid-stage magnetics. Even us from the major factions only have about 10 or less magnetics under our employ. The minor factions have about 4 to 7. And we were only able to create that through generations of investments and stockpiling. And you'll be able to get to our depth in just a few years. She wasn't even taking into account his future growth. Just as she discussed before, he would only get more and more sand dollars as they attracted more merman visitors. And by her estimations, there could potentially be thousands or tens of thousands of mermen that would visit just Metropolis alone. And if all those mermen visited Michael's roller coaster, then he'd be earning tens of thousands of sand dollars in a single day. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.